Chapter 1179. Nietion's figure hid behind a huge rock, looking at the figures flitting past nonstop above his head, and could not help frowning. These people were all swordsmen. Furthermore, their strengths were not weak. The vast majority were above Heavenly Emperor realm. Furthermore, their ages were not old either, basically all young swordsmen under 50 years old. What on earth are they going to do? Nietion had a puzzled look. So many swordsmen appearing at the same time, rushing to a certain place. Could it be that something major happened? Ignore him. Still improving my own strength is more important, Nietion said in his heart, and no longer paid attention to these people. The most important thing for him currently was still to improve his own strength. The key was to familiarize himself with the third and fourth forms of the Starry Sky ancient martial art. Nietion no longer delayed, finding a secluded valley and sensing for a bit. After confirming that there was no one around, he entered the valley. Sitting cross-legged, entering a cultivation state, Nietion's divine sense directly entered the starry origin stone. Nietion was currently a 4th-level Heavenly Emperor. The starry power awakened in his body 340 billion. In the Star River domain, on the 4th layer of the Star River, nearly half of the power of the stars had been awakened. The Star River shone brightly, giving off a huge aura of life, as if a whole new world was about to be born. Nietion did not hesitate, his divine sense directly locking onto the Starry Sky ancient martial art. The ancient scroll, flickering with starlight, slowly opened. Starlight runes appeared, very quickly condensing into a starlight giant, standing above the galaxy. Starry Sky ancient martial art, 3rd form, Heavenly Star Guardian. Immediately, a vast and mighty voice sounded out. The starlight giant's body suddenly released endless starry power, gradually condensing into a starlight shield. It was actually an enormous humanoid phantom, as if a celestial god had descended. This is the Starry Sky ancient martial arts defensive move. Nietion immediately reacted, his body trembling slightly. Starry power gushed out from his body, rapidly condensing into the Heavenly Star Guardian. His entire body flickered with the aura of stars. What a powerful guardian power! The instant the Heavenly Star Guardian appeared, Nietion felt a massive power surge around his body. This kind of guardian power was much more terrifying than heaven, shrouding, totem, war god, 3 seals, and other means. With Nietion's current strength, if he condensed all of the power of the stars, the Heavenly Star Guardian was sufficient to let him withstand a head-on attack from 7th level, even 8th level Heavenly Emperor. If I can reach the strength of a 9th level Heavenly Emperor, just by relying on the Heavenly Star protection, I could be unafraid of the attacks of martial artists of the same level. The corners of Nietion's mouth curled up, a confident look on his face. If he could awaken sufficient stellar power, the Heavenly Star Guardian's defensive power was sufficient to make him not fear any 9th level Heavenly Emperor martial artist. But 9th level Heavenly Emperor was still somewhat far away to the current Nietion. He still needed a very long time before he could reach it. Let's look at the 4th style of the Starry Sky ancient martial technique. Nietion smiled faintly, and the Heavenly Star protection around his body disappeared. With a thought, the Starry Sky ancient martial art flipped to the 4th page. But this time, what surprised Nietion was that the runes that gushed out from the Starry Sky ancient martial technique were no longer twinkling starlight runes, but clusters of black runes. The aura was very weak, and it was extremely difficult to discover. Amen. When Nietion saw this scene, his gaze involuntarily turned intent. He did not expect that it would be like this. Starry Sky ancient martial technique, 4th move, Dark Star Ghost Kill. The next instant, a vast and low voice sounded out. The black runes surging in the space converged to form a black sharp blade, flickering with a somber and cold light. Nietion's divine sense probed over. That black sharp blade's aura was very weak, but it gave people a very terrifying feeling of threat. Only when Tion's divine sense entered the black sharp blade did he feel this blade's horrifying aura. This is indeed condensed and formed from stellar power, virtually soundless. Looks like it's very suitable for assassination. Tion immediately understood, the corners of his mouth curling up into a sinister smile. Even he felt that the Dark Star Ghost Kill's aura was weak, let alone the others. Hence, the Dark Star Ghost Kill could be used as an assassination method, appearing noiselessly. Morning Star Daybreak, Meteor Wings, Heavenly Star Protection, Dark Star Ghost Kill. Looks like every move of the Starry Sky ancient martial art is biased towards something. Very good. After a moment, Tion became cold and muttered. He already completely understood that the Starry Sky ancient martial arts' every move was different. Morning Star Daybreak had a very strong impact on seals, restrictions, and so on. Furthermore, it was more flexible and could attack, defend, and so on. It should be a comprehensive method. Meteor Wings increase speed, and at the same time, it also had a certain amount of attack and defense capabilities. Heavenly Star Protection was an absolute defensive method, able to resist all kinds of attacks. While the Dark Star Ghost Kill was an assassination method, giving the opponent a fatal blow at the most critical time. I wonder what the following 5 moves will be. Smiling slightly, Tion looked forward to the Starry Sky ancient martial arts ladder 5 moves even more in his heart. In the following time, he cultivated bitterly in the valley, practicing the Heavenly Star Protection and Dark Star Ghost Kill over and over again. Each move of the Starry Sky ancient martial art was very strange. It required continuous repeated practice before one could achieve free control. 3 days later, Tion already pretty much grasped the Heavenly Star Protection and Dark Star Ghost Kill. I'm already peak 4th level Heavenly Emperor now. Before long, I'll be able to break through to 5th level Heavenly Emperor. Let's leave this place first before talking. Tion stood up and prepared to leave the profound Yellow Mountain Range. Right at this time, a series of chaotic voices came from outside the valley. Senior Apprentice Brother, we'd better hurry up and catch up to Teacher they all. If Teacher discovers that we're not around, he'll definitely be angry. A woman's voice was sweet, very alluring. It's fine. I've already told Teacher. There are some things that need to be dealt with. A man's voice was very lascivious. Then what do you want to deal with, Senior Apprentice Brother? That woman's voice sounded out once more. Of course it's to deal with you, my little junior sister. The man's voice sounded out, clearly already unable to wait. Senior Apprentice Brother, you're so naughty. A sweet scream sounded out. Following that, 2 figures entered the valley. Tion saw a man and a woman with disheveled clothes appear in front of him. They actually completely did not discover his existence. He just laughed and prepared to leave this valley to make room for these 2 people. These 2 people were clearly a senior brother and sister who were having fun behind their teacher's back. But this had nothing to do with Tion. He did not want to be nosy either. Senior Apprentice Brother, there's someone. Right this time, that woman discovered Tion's existence and suddenly screamed, subconsciously covering the important parts of her body. Tion shook his head and smiled. This woman was still considered somewhat good-looking. Her figure and skin were all beauty grade. Unfortunately, she did not attract him at all. Tion also did not pay attention just now. If he had long known that someone was coming, he would have long dodged. I'm leaving. You guys continue, Tion said and immediately strode away. Chapter 1180. Amen. Tion had originally already taken a step to leave when he suddenly felt a sharp chill behind him, making his figure involuntarily stagnate, stopping in midair. Encountering this kind of thing, Tion originally did not want to cause trouble, but very clearly he wanted to leave, but the other party did not want to let him go. Stinking brat, who are you? That man spoke, cold to the extreme, a hint of killing intent hidden in his eyes. Tion turned around to look at the 2, swept his divine sense over, shook his head, and said, "The 2 of you have decent strength and talent. Unfortunately, you're obsessed with lust and don't walk the right path. It's truly a pity. Let me give you a word of advice. there's a limit to everything. You mustn't indulge in it. These two people should be young martial artists who came out to train with their teacher. They actually could not resist just this little bit of effort and secretly ran out to do improper things. This man's age was roughly in his 30s or 40s, while the woman was only 18 or 19 years old. Such a big age difference between martial artists was not considered much. Many people had a difference of several hundred years. But this man's expression was sinister, his eyes frivolous. One look, and it was clear that he was not a decent person. He should just be playing with a woman. After saying this, Nietian prepared to leave, not wanting to waste any more time on people who were not worth it. However, that man did not plan on letting Nietian leave like this. He suddenly smiled sinisterly and spoke coldly. "Brat, do you know who I am?" "Don't know, and not interested to know," Nietianling said indifferently. If the other party continued to pester, he would not be courteous anymore. Amen. The man's face immediately darkened, and he said solemnly, "Stinking brat, I'm called Xue Xuanqing, a swordsman on the Earth Sword Storm list." Oh, hearing the name Earth Sword Storm list, Nietian's gaze could not help flickering, and he said with a smile, "So, it's someone on the Earth Sword Storm list. No wonder your strength reached 5th level Heavenly Emperor, and also Sword Soul's Sword Dao realm." The Heaven Realm's Divine Realm had two great sword lists. One was the Heaven Sword Storm list, the other was the Earth Sword Storm list. The Sky Sword ranking was a ranking of swordsmen who were over 100 years old. In the past, Nietian was ranked first on the Sky Sword ranking. His Sword Dao strength was on par with Mo Qianjun and the other three. The reason why he was ranked first was because he was the youngest. The Earth Sword ranking was a ranking of swordsmen below the age of 100. Nietian was once ranked first on the Earth Sword ranking. In the past life, he was the strongest Earth Sword cultivator from the age of 20 until he left the ranking at the age of 100. He was the strongest Earth Sword cultivator for a total of 80 years, setting a new record on the Earth Sword ranking. Nietian felt an inexplicable sense of closeness towards the Earth Sword ranking. However, when these words came out of Xue Xuanqing's mouth, he felt humiliated. A swordsman who couldn't even control his lower body was not worthy of being on the Earth Sword Excellence leaderboard. How shameful! "Brat, it's your misfortune to have met me today, because you will die here today." Xue Xuanqing sneered, his eyes flashing with coldness. "You want to kill me just because I saw your dirty deeds?" Nietian's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect this guy to not only be shameless, but also vicious. "That's right." Xue Xuanqing's eyes twitched. "You can't blame me for this. You can only blame your bad luck. Senior brother, you can just scare him. You don't have to kill him, right?" At this time, the girl spoke. She didn't want to kill Nietian. She just didn't want him to leak what happened here. Xue Xuanqing's spiritual energy fluctuated, and he said coldly, "Junior sister, only a dead man can keep secrets. Looks like you're determined to kill me." Nietian nodded slightly. His lips curled into a strange smile. "Very well. I really want to see how strong a swordsman on the Earth Sword ranking is." "You're looking for death." Xue Xuanqing noticed the disdain in Nietian's eyes and frowned. With a low growl, the sword intent that was surging around his body suddenly exploded. Like a violent storm, he slashed at Nietian. Sword chi billowed, and the sword intent was murderous. Only a few dozen meters away, Xue Xuanqing spared no effort. It was obvious that he wanted to kill his opponent in one hit. "You're the one who's looking for death." Almost at the same time, Nietian's voice rang out. His body trembled and a wave of sword intent rushed out, directly tearing the incoming sword shadow into pieces. Bang! After a muffled sound, Xue Xuanqing was sent flying. The arm that he used to attack with the sword was broken into pieces, dripping with blood. It was crippled. "Ah, my arm!" A heart-wrenching scream was heard. Xue Xuanqing couldn't bear the pain, and his body trembled. The girl who was watching from the side was scared out of her wits. Her senior brother, who was a genius in her eyes, couldn't even take a single attack from Nietian. This was too terrifying. Moreover, in the previous attack, Xue Xuanqing already had the upper hand. However, Niet Tian didn't even use his sword and directly crippled Xue Xuanqing's arm. Is this all you've got? Niet Tian looked at Xue Xuanqing, who was trembling on the ground. His eyes were cold, and he said coldly, "For someone like you to be on the Earth Sword ranking is an insult to the Earth Sword ranking." You. Xue Xuanqing finally calmed down a little. After being reprimanded by Niet Tian, he didn't feel any shame. Instead, a terrifying killing intent surged in his heart. He didn't expect that Niet Tian's strength was actually so formidable. He was the 37th place on the Earth Sword ranking. He basically knew all those who were stronger than him on the Earth Sword ranking. He had never heard of a person named Niet Tian before. Originally, he thought that Niet Tian was just an ant swordsman that he could kill casually. But he didn't expect that he was the ant swordsman instead. Xue Xuanqing couldn't understand. But Niet Tian's strength was clearly only a 4th-level heavenly emperor, 1 level weaker than him. But his sword intent could be so strong. It was inconceivable. What about me? Niet Tianling smiled coldly and walked over step by step, the killing intent in his eyes getting thicker and thicker. Originally, he was in a pretty good mood today and didn't want to kill people. But sadly, Xue Xuanqing courted death himself. He couldn't be blamed for this. Why you can't kill me? I'm from Hidden Sword Valley. Xue Xuanqing was shrouded by thick, killing intent. His face was deathly pale as paper as he said with a trembling voice, "Hidden Sword Valley." Hearing these 3 words, Niet Tian's gaze turned intense slightly, his footsteps immediately stopping. He did not expect that Xue Xuanqing was actually from Hidden Sword Valley. Hidden Sword Valley, one of the Heaven Realm's Divine Realm's 9 great sword sections. Its strength could not be underestimated. As long as you don't kill me, I definitely won't find you to take revenge. Xue Xuanqing saw Niet Tian hesitate and thought that the latter was afraid, so he hurriedly said. The corners of Niet Tian's mouth curled slightly, the killing intent all over his body immediately dissipating. He did not kill Xue Xuanqing not because he was afraid of Hidden Sword Valley, but to give face to its valley lord, Ling Zhan. In his previous life, Niet Tian and Hidden Sword Valley's valley lord, Ling Zhan, had met several times before. The 2 people were still considered to have some friendship. Hence, he spared Xue Xuanqing. Niet Tian no longer bothered with Xue Xuanqing and prepared to turn around and leave. But at this time, he suddenly thought of something, turned around abruptly, and asked, "Did something happen recently? Why did so many swordsmen appear in Heaven Wasteland unaging?" Some of the things that happened recently were rather strange. Niet Tian was rather curious. Xue Xuanqing's eyes trembled slightly, and he said honestly, "In a mountain range of Heaven Wasteland unaging, an ancient sword tomb opened." Chapter 1181. Ancient Sword Tomb. Hearing these 4 words, Niet Tian's expression stiffened slightly. Then, his eyes couldn't help but flicker. Of course, he understood what the ancient sword tomb represented. It was enough to make any swordsman crazy. There was a sword tomb in the Heaven Sword Pavilion of the Sumi world. There were many famous swords and many sword Dao inheritances. However, compared to the ancient sword tomb, it was a far cry. The sword mounds left behind from the ancient times were likely to contain the sword Dao inheritances of many ancient swordsmen, countless famous ancient swords, and even ancient sword formations, sword techniques, and the like. No wonder there were so many swordsmen flying over these days. It turned out that the ancient sword tomb had appeared. Where is the ancient sword tomb? Niet Tian became cold. He looked at Xue Xuanqing and asked coldly. In the infinite desolate mountain range. Xue Xuanqing's voice trembled slightly, but when he realized that Niet Tian was also going to the primordial sword tomb, he became happy in his heart. As long as he could meet Niet Tian again, he would definitely take revenge for what happened today. The infinite desolate mountain range. Niet Tian thought for a while. He had been there before and fought with Duguan at the infinite desolate mountain range. He was very familiar with the place. It seemed that it was necessary to go there again. The Heaven Slash Sword was a rank 7 spiritual weapon now. It couldn't withstand Niet Tian's sword intent anymore. If Niet Tian combined 4 sword intents and the power of the starry holy flame, it was very likely that he could destroy the Heaven-Slash Sword. The Heaven-Slash Sword was forged with the heart of stars. It was personally forged by the number 1 blacksmith in the Heaven Realm, Tiangong. When the sword was forged, the sword radiance soared into the sky and shocked the Heaven Realm. It was known as the first of the 10 famous swords in the Heaven Realm. Tiangong was the teacher of the Blacksmith Guild's president, by Mingbo. It was said that after he forged the Heaven-Slash Sword, he no longer forged swords. He even rarely forged other spiritual weapons, because the Heaven-Slash Sword was his proudest work. With such a work in his life, he had no regrets. The sword Absolute Heaven Slash was once the head of the 10 famed swords. How could Nietian let it remain a rank 7 spiritual artifact? There must be many famous swords left behind in the ancient sword tomb. I want to get one of them and fuse it with the Heaven-Slash Sword. I want the Heaven-Slash Sword to become a rank 9 Emperor artifact again. It might even become a divine artifact that surpasses rank 9. Nietian said in his heart. His eyes were shining with a strange light. "Sir, can we leave now?" At this moment, Xue Xuanqing spoke with a trembling voice. His face was tense, afraid that Nietian would not let them go. Scram. Niet Tianling waved his hand indifferently. They were just 2 ants. He didn't care about them at all. It was best for Xue Xuanqing to give up now and stop thinking about revenge. Otherwise, he would be the one regretting it. Nietian did not even put the Valley Master of the Hidden Sword Valley, Ling Zhan, in his eyes. How could he be afraid of a mere Xue Xuanqing? "Buddy, let's go to the Tianwang mountain range first." When Xue Xuanqing and Xue Xuanqing's aura completely disappeared, the Heaven-Slash Sword appeared in Nietian's hand. The corners of his mouth raised into a gratified smile. The time for the Heaven-Slash Sword to truly show its brilliance had arrived. If Nietian wanted to investigate the truth behind how he was killed back then, he had to either find the people from the Crimson Flame Devil Palace or find Luo Chunhun and ask him face to face. Right now, Nietian's strength was still too weak. It was impossible to go find Luo Chunhun directly. At present, the best choice for him was to start with the Azura sect. If he could find the Azura sect patriarch or the Azura sect's upper echelon, he might be able to ask some things. Although he could not find the Azura sect people, as long as he appeared, the Azura sect people would naturally find him. I just have to make a little commotion, and the Azura sect people will naturally appear. Thinking up to here, Nietian smiled faintly. At this time, he was not very afraid of the Azura sect assassins coming. With his current strength, even if the one coming was an 8th level or 9th level Heavenly Emperor powerhouse, he still had the confidence to escape calmly. After all, the speed of the wings of Meteor was not what anyone could achieve. Nietian walked out of the valley and was just about to leave when he noticed that there were 2 figures currently walking unhurriedly in front. Several thousand meters away, a middle-aged man and a teenager walked side by side. "Senior apprentice brother, do we really have a chance to enter the ancient sword tomb?" The teenager's slightly childish voice sounded out, seemingly very worried. "Little junior brother, are you scared?" The middle-aged man laughed heartily, carrying thick feelings of concern. The ancient sword tomb's emergence this time alarmed too many. "I heard that many swordsmen from the 9 great sword sects and the Wind and Cloud list all went. I'm just a little worried." The teenager shook his head slightly, showing maturity beyond his age. "Little junior brother, don't worry. Teacher asked us to go to Heaven Desolate Mountain just to broaden our horizons and see more of the other genius swordsmen's sword Dao strength. It's also not bad," the middle-aged man said, but he was somewhat dejected. "Han Ling, Pu Fifen." Right at this time, a pleasantly surprised voice sounded out behind the 2 people. It was precisely Nietian. These 2 figures were none other than precisely Han Ling and Pu Fifen. Nietian did not expect that he would actually encounter these 2 people here. "Sir." Han Ling turned around and saw Nietian with a look of joy, similarly pleasantly surprised. "Duanmu Lu's teacher." Pu Fifen was stunned, then immediately turned his head away in annoyance. He clearly did not have any good impression of Nietian. "Junior brother." Han Ling saw Pu Fifen's reaction and could not help reminding. Pu Fifan did not know Nie Tian's true identity, and he was also a child. Nie Tian naturally would not mind. Han Ling, are you guys also going to Heaven Desolate Mountain? Nie Tian asked with a faint smile. Han Ling nodded slightly, but appeared somewhat awkward as he said, Teacher wants us to go and broaden our horizons. Han Ling's strength was only second-level Heavenly Emperor, and his Sword Dao realm was also only Sword Soul. Going to Heaven Desolate Mountain with this kind of strength, there was simply no chance of entering the Ancient Sword Tomb. The Ancient Sword Tomb was a land of treasures. Of course, not everyone could enter. Only those with sufficient strength had the qualifications to enter. You're also going to Heaven Desolate Mountain? Pu Fifan was stunned for a moment. Looking at Nie Tian, he sensed that the latter's aura became stronger, and his brows could not help but furrow, feeling very strange. Yes, Nie Tian smiled faintly, his gaze sweeping across Pu Fifan, a hint of surprise flashing across his eyes. The last time he saw Pu Fifan, the latter's strength was merely first-level Heaven being Sword Force realm. But a short few months passed, Pu Fifan's strength actually already reached 6th-level Heaven being Sword Spirit realm. Such terrifying strength, improvement speed. Mo. Qianjun indeed took in a good disciple. If Pu Fifan did not die prematurely, a new pinnacle of Sword Dao would definitely appear in the Heaven realm 100 years later. And Han Ling's talent was much worse than Pu Fifan. After a few months, he still made no progress. Han Ling, since you're Han Fei's son, I'll definitely let you enter the Ancient Sword Tomb. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up slightly as he thought to himself. He knew that Han Ling definitely wanted to save his father, Han Fei, but his strength was seriously too weak. The Ancient Sword Tomb, this time, was a chance for his strength to increase. Chapter 1182. Nie Tian noticed the sword mark on Han Ling's face, and his face darkened. Leaving a sword mark on a swordsman's face was a great humiliation to the swordsman. Sir, I'm fine. I accidentally scratched myself. Han Ling subconsciously covered the sword mark on his face and said nervously, Han Ling, tell me, who did this? Nie Tian obviously wouldn't believe such an explanation. A swordsman in the Sword Soul realm would scratch his own face. Even a ghost wouldn't believe it. Moreover, the person who did this had obviously infused a terrifying sword intent into the sword mark on Han Ling's face. That was why the sword mark didn't disappear after such a long time. Otherwise, with Han Ling's strength, this kind of sword mark would heal instantly. This person left a sword mark on Han Ling's face to humiliate him. Sir, Han Ling wanted to say something, but stopped. His forehead was covered in sweat. It's my own fault. Nie Tian frowned even more. He turned to Pu Fifan and asked, Pu Fifan, tell me what happened. Pu Fifan looked at Han Ling and finally said, the sword mark on Senior Martial Brother's face was left by Qin Yang of the Sword Ocean Spectator. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he asked in a deep voice, Sword Gazers, what's going on? Sword Ocean Spectator was one of the 9 major sword sects of the Heaven Realm, just like Hidden Sword Valley. Junior Martial Brother, let me explain myself. Han Ling waved his hand and calmed down. He looked at Nie Tian and said, Sir, when I was young, I was engaged to Miss Qin Yu of the Sword Ocean Spectator. I had forgotten about it. But when I returned from the Summer World, I met Miss Qin Yu by chance. We fell in love with each other. After I returned to the Wuji Mountain, my teacher found out about this and asked me to go to the Sword Ocean Spectator to propose. But I went to the Sword Ocean Spectator and told the leader of the Sword Ocean Spectator, Lord Qin Changqi. Not only did they not let me meet Miss Qin Yu, they also forced me to fight Qin Yang. I was no match for Qin Yang, so I became like this. After saying all this, Han Ling's expression became much more relaxed. He sighed and said, Lady Qin Yu and I were not fated to be together in the end. We can't blame anyone else. Who is Qin Yang? After listening to everything, Nie Tian's face darkened. He knew about the engagement between Han Ling and Qin Yu, and it was Qin Changqi, the head of the Sword Observation C, who had suggested it. At that time, Nie Tian was like the sun in the sky, and Han Fei was also a genius swordsman of the younger generation. The reason why Guan Jianhai took the initiative to propose the marriage was because he wanted to borrow Niet Tian's reputation to raise Guan Jinhai's status in the heaven realm. But who would have thought that Niet Tian would fall in the end? Everyone related to Niet Tian avoided him like the plague. Han Ling had originally forgotten about this engagement, but he had met Qin Yu by chance, so he brought it up again. The people of the Sea of Swords obviously looked down on Han Ling, so not only did they break off the engagement, but they also humiliated Han Ling. If the people of the Sea of Swords only broke off the engagement, Niet Tian could understand and could also accept it. After all, he had already fallen. But the people of the Sea of Swords left a sword scar on Han Ling's face, causing unprecedented humiliation to him. This point, Niet Tian absolutely could not accept it. No wonder when he saw Han Ling again, the latter's mentality was completely different. His mood was gloomy, and his will was downcast. Qin Yang is Miss Qin Yu's elder brother. Not only did he injure senior apprentice brother, he even said that if not on account of teacher's face, he would cripple senior apprentice brother's sword Dao cultivation. He even scolded that senior apprentice brother is a good-for-nothing, not even able to make it onto the heavenly sword storm list at over 100 years old. Pu Fifan was young after all, shooting his mouth off. When Han Ling went to the Sea of Swords, Pu Fifan went with him. Hence, he knew everything very clearly. Junior apprentice brother, don't say any more. Han Ling gave a low roar, his expression ugly to the extreme. Pu Fifan's words were undoubtedly sprinkling salt on his wounds. His talent was indeed not good at this age, but he only had second-level heavenly emperor strength. His sword Dao realm was also just sword soul. This kind of strength and talent, forget about comparing to Pu Fifan, even Xue Xuanqing was much stronger than him. Pu Fifan, what else did Qin Yang say? Niet Tian had a grim expression. Although he was calm on the surface, the blood in his heart was surging wildly without ceasing. Pu Fifan gave Han Ling a glance and said with an indignant look, Qin Yang even said that senior apprentice brother can't make it onto the heavenly sword storm list in this lifetime. If senior apprentice brother can make it onto the heavenly sword storm list, he'll personally send Miss Qin Yu to the Limitless Mountain. Furthermore, he'll even kowtow and apologize to senior apprentice brother. The Limitless Mountain was precisely where Mo Qianjun was at. Is that so? Niet Tian's gaze was dark, his eyes glimmering with a cold light. He practically squeezed the two words out from the gaps of his teeth. Back then, when Sea of Swords proposed the engagement, he did not say such words. When I'm a big tree, you lean on me to enjoy the shade. When the tree topples, you step on it together with others. This kind of change in attitude was really intolerable. If Han Ling was not Mo Qianjuan's disciple, the people from Sea of Swords would have directly crippled him or even killed him. Not only did Qin Yang humiliate Han Ling by leaving a sword scar on his face, he also mocked Han Ling that he would never be able to make it onto the heavenly sword storm list in his lifetime. This was a huge blow to Han Ling, and it even left behind an inner demon in his heart. Once a martial artist had an inner demon in his heart, it would be as difficult as climbing a mountain for him to improve his strength. The path of martial arts was originally a boat sailing against the current. If one did not even have the motivation to move forward, how could one reach the peak? Mister, it's my incompetence. It's not anyone else's fault. Han Ling's expression was extremely disappointed as he lowered his head and said, Bullsh asterisk T. Niet Tian suddenly roared. His entire body surged with a majestic aura. He suddenly looked at Han Ling and shouted in a deep voice, Han Ling, raise your head. Mister, Han Ling suddenly felt a violent aura enveloping him. He couldn't help but raise his head, and his expression slightly stiffened. Han Ling, you are Han Fei's son. You are not inferior to anyone. Niet Tian looked at Han Ling coldly and shouted angrily, Your father is still imprisoned in the sky's edge purgatory. He has to endure the torture of the soul, refining fire, every day. He is waiting for you to save him. If you continue to be depressed, is this what a son should do? Han Ling looked at Niet Tian, but he did not know what to say. It's all because of Qin Yang that senior brother became like this. One day, when I'm strong enough, I will definitely make him kneel in front of senior brother and apologize. At this time, Pu Fifan clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes were filled with anger. Han Ling, do you see this? Nie Tian's eyes darkened again, and he shouted, Pu Fifan is only a child, but he still knows how to take revenge. You have been humiliated so much. Do you not want to improve and continue to be depressed? How can you be a swordsman if you become depressed after a little setback? As the sonorous voice fell, it was like a steel needle piercing into Han Ling's heart, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. Nie Tian was right. If he, Han Ling, continued to be depressed like this, he would not be worthy of being a son. If he did not even have the thought of taking revenge, how could he be a swordsman? Chapter 1183. In the forest, a roar resounded in the sky, reverberating through the air. Han Ling's facial features were twisted, his face hideous. Senior brother, are you all right? Pu Fifan was shocked to see Han Ling like this. If he knew that Han Ling would become like this, he wouldn't have said so much to Nie Tian. Nie Tian laughed and said he's fine. He'll be fine after he calms down. Anger was much better than losing the will to fight. Nie Tian's words just now were to provoke Han Ling and get rid of the inner demons in his heart. If he didn't do that, Han Ling would never be able to get on the Sky Sword ranking. Han Ling wasn't very talented, and it would be difficult for him to get on the Sky Sword ranking under normal circumstances. But now that he met Nie Tian, everything was possible. Han Ling, don't worry. I'll definitely get you on the Sky Sword ranking. Nie Tian smirked and sneered in his heart. I want to see how that Qin Yang guy is going to send his sister to the Wuji Mountain and apologize to you. Qin Yang was too vicious. If he looked down on Han Ling, he could have just rejected the marriage. He didn't have to leave a sword mark on Han Ling's face and humiliate him. Mo Qianjun definitely knew about this, but he couldn't interfere. After all, this was a matter between juniors. He was a peak sword principle expert. If he personally went to the Sword Ocean Spectator to seek justice for Han Ling, how would the people in the God Realm think of him? Mo Qianjun was a calm person and had many things to consider. If it was Jiao Qiansheng or Long Outyin, they wouldn't care so much. If you dare touch my disciple, I'll destroy your sect. Jiao Qiansheng had a fiery temper, while Mo Qianjun was as calm as water. The Sword Ocean Spectator probably knew this, which was why they dared to humiliate Han Ling so brazenly. Mo Qianjun wanted Han Ling and Pu Fifan to go to the Tianwang Mountain because he wanted Han Ling to change his environment and meet other sword principle geniuses. Maybe he could get rid of his inner demons. Sir, thank you for your guidance. I've thought it through. Han Ling regained his composure and nodded at Nie Tian. It's good that you understand. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. At least his painstaking efforts were not in vain. Senior brother, are you done? Pu Fifan's face was full of joy. Suddenly, he looked at Nie Tian and whispered, this guy is quite powerful. Although Han Ling and Pu Fifan were fellow disciples, they were actually father and son. Ever since Pu Fifan stepped into the Limitless Mountain, he had always been with Han Ling. They ate and lived together, and their relationship was very deep. Pu Fifan was very happy to see Han Ling regain his fighting spirit. Let's go. Nie Tian nodded slightly and prepared to head to Tianwang Mountain. If he was lucky, he might even be able to see the people who watched the Sword Ocean. At this moment, Nie Tian really wanted to meet the Sword Ocean Master, Qin Shanqi, and tell him personally that he, Nie Tian, was back. If Qin Shanqi knew that Nie Tian was still alive, he would definitely be shocked. Yo, isn't this the kid with the surname Han? Before Nie Tian and the others could take a few steps, an ear-piercing voice came from the sky with extreme mockery. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head, and his cold eyes locked onto the figures in the sky. It's the people from the Sword Ocean. Pu Fifan looked up and exclaimed when he saw them. Nie Tian's brows sank again, and the corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile. He was just thinking about the people from the Sword Ocean, and he did not expect them to appear directly. This guy with the surname Han is really shameless. Young Master left a sword mark on his face, and he still dares to come out and embarrass himself. In the sky, an extremely sarcastic voice came, followed by ear-piercing laughter. Yes, young Master Sword Mark needs at least half a year to disappear, and this guy came out with a sword mark on his face. His skin is really thick. If I were Lord Limitless Sword Saint, if I had such a disciple to disgrace me, I'd definitely cripple him personally. Another person snickered, and the words he said were nasty to the ears. Subo, it's you. When Han Ling heard these people's words, his gaze fell slightly, and he spoke coldly. The few people in the sky, he knew all of them. He went to the Sword Ocean previously, and these few people saw him being defeated and humiliated by Qin Yang with their own eyes. Nie Tian's gaze swept over those few people, and he immediately confirmed that Qin Yang was not among them. These few people were all second-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Seeing that their realms were all sword souls, this kind of strength was too weak. Qin Yang was Qin Chanchi's son, the Sword Ocean's young master. His strength was absolutely not just this. Han Ling, you even know this lord's name? At this time, those few people's figures directly landing only several dozen meters away from Yetian and the rest. Subo, there's no grudge between you and me. I don't wish to hurt you. Han Ling looked at the young man in the lead and said coldly. This person was called Subo, one of Qin Yang's trusted aides. Back then, when Qin Yang insulted Han Ling, Subo was at the scene. Furthermore, he incessantly fanned the flames. Otherwise, Qin Yang would not have humiliated Han Ling to such an extent either. Don't wish to hurt me. Subo laughed, very arrogant as he said in a loud voice. This young master wants to see how Lord Limitless Sword Saint's disciple wants to hurt me. Han Ling was Mo Qianjuan's disciple. Being able to humiliate the Limitless Sword Saint's disciple. This made Subo feel a perverse sense of satisfaction. Cripple him. Nie Tian stared at Subo and said directly. Subo's strength was the same as Han Ling's, but he was absolutely not Han Ling's match. Han Ling should have stopped at second-level Heavenly Emperor for a very long time already. His true combat strength was not much weaker compared to third-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. What the hell are you? All the way until Nie Tian opened his mouth to speak did Subo detect his existence. He just swept a glance, saw that it was a silver-haired youth, and could not be bothered to pay attention at all. Han Ling froze for a moment, then immediately understood Nie Tian's meaning. His entire body's sword momentum suddenly erupted, and he did not hesitate anymore, directly attacking. Under one sword, sword momentum surged, sword intent roaring. An enormous sword shadow pounced out like a ferocious beast. Subo's brows tightened, clearly not expecting that Han Ling's strength was so formidable. Making a hasty move, but he already could not block a sword attack, directly crying out and flying out backward. You, how can you be so strong? Subo lay on the ground, a trace of blood overflowing from the corners of his mouth. He had once personally seen Qin Yang defeat Han Ling without using a sword, so he thought that he could defeat Han Ling too. Sadly, he overestimated himself too much. Han Ling was defeated by Qin Yang not because Han Ling was too weak, but because Qin Yang was too strong. Subo did not have Qin Yang's strength, but he wanted to be as arrogant as Qin Yang, truly courting death himself. Humph! Han Ling gave a cold laugh and suddenly walked over step by step, a cold intent flickering in his eyes. The other few people wanted to make a move and actually discovered that they were enveloped by a tyrannical aura. Even their essence meridians were firmly suppressed. These few people looked toward Nie Tian at the same time. It was precisely the latter suppressing their essence meridians. What do you want to do? When Subo saw Han Ling walk over, the terror in his eyes intensified, and he said in panic, I'm someone from Sword Sea Gazing. Why you can't kill me? Relax, I won't kill you. Han Ling smiled cold and said, Today it was you who sought humiliation yourself. Can't blame me. The cold voice faded. A streak of sword light flashed across the air. Subo's face immediately had an additional bloody gash, blood flowing nonstop. Chapter 1184. The Humiliation of a Sword Scar. Han Ling did not kill Subo, nor did he cripple him. Instead, he left a sword scar on his face. What did you do to me? Subo suddenly realized something. His eyes trembled, and great fear appeared in his eyes. Senior brother Su, this kid left a sword scar on your face. A swordsman beside him screamed when he saw the scar on Subo's face. The others were also stunned. They did not expect that Han Ling, who looked like a yes man, would dare to do such a thing and humiliate a swordsman who was observing the sword ocean. The humiliation of a sword scar. Subo screamed and touched the wound on his face subconsciously. The scar was so obvious that he could not heal it no matter how hard he tried. It was obvious that Han Ling had integrated sword will into the attack, and it could not heal in a short period of time. Although Han Ling's sword will was not as strong as Qin Yang's, it would take at least a few days to heal the scar. Han Ling left the sword scar on Subo's face to tell Qin Yang that he would return the humiliation Qin Yang had inflicted on him several times over. Get lost! Han Ling glared at Subo and the others and roared in a deep voice. Subo and the others felt like they had just been pardoned. They left immediately and did not even dare to look back. Sir, seeing that Subo and the others had already left, Han Ling turned to look at Nietian. Unable to hide the worry on his face, he said, Teacher told us to keep a low profile. I don't know if what I did was inappropriate. It's fine. Nietian smiled and said, I don't think Brother Mo will blame you. Although Mo Qianjun was a calm person, he would definitely protect his disciple. Therefore, even if he did not agree with Han Ling's actions, he would still protect Han Ling since he had already done it. Hu Fifan looked up at Han Ling and asked worriedly, Senior brother, you humiliated the people from the Sword Ocean. Will they take revenge? Revenge? Yeah, Tianling smiled coldly and said, I'll wait for them to take revenge. Then, the three of them did not waste any more time and headed straight for the Infinite Mountain Range. 2 days later, the three of them arrived at the outskirts of the Infinite Mountain Range, only to find that the entire mountain range had been sealed. The only entrance was guarded by a powerful swordsman. These swordsmen should be from the Heaven Wasteland Hall. Nietian looked at the sword guardian in the distance and said in a deep voice, The discovery of the primordial sword tomb in the Infinite Desolate Mountain Range is definitely a big event that alarmed the sword world. It's reasonable for the Heaven Desolate Hall to seal the Infinite Desolate Mountain Range. The Heaven Wasteland Palace was the strongest sword sect among the 9 great sword sects of the Heaven Realm. Dugu and I, who was at the peak of the 5 great sword principles, was a member of the Heaven Wasteland Palace. What was even more peculiar was that Dugu and I was not the Hall Master of the Heaven Desolate Hall, but a Deputy Hall Master. The Hall Master of the Heaven Wasteland Hall was Dugu Ni's senior brother, Songshan Shui. Songshan Shui was a very mysterious person who rarely showed his strength in front of others. It was rumored in the Heaven Realm that Songshan Shui's strength was not inferior to Dugu Ni's. Nietian guessed that Songshan Shui should be a swordsman of the same level as Dugu and I. Otherwise, Dugu and I would not have given up the position of Hall Master of the Heaven Wasteland Hall. However, Songshan Shui did not pursue fame and fortune, so his reputation in the sword world was far inferior to Dugu Ni's. In addition, Songshan Shui and Dugu and I also had a teacher, the Old Man of Heaven Wasteland. It was said that he was already 800 or 900 years old. A few hundred years ago, he was a legend of the sword principle in the Heaven Realm. He had not shown his face for hundreds of years, and no one knew if he was still alive. The Heaven Wasteland Hall was a force that was not weaker than the 9 emperors in the Heaven Realm. With them guarding the Infinite Desolate Mountain Range, naturally no swordsman would dare to trespass. They sealed the Infinite Desolate Mountain Range. Are they not allowing other swordsmen to enter? Hu Fifan frowned and asked in a low voice, That's impossible. To enter the sword tomb, one must have the strength. Nietian smiled faintly and said, It seems that the Heaven Wasteland Hall wants to select a group of people and only allow true sword principle geniuses to enter the sword tomb. Yes. Han Ling nodded slightly and said, Mister, let's go to the Heaven Wasteland City first. Most of the swordsmen are already there. Okay. Nietian agreed and looked at an ancient city outside the Heaven Wasteland Mountain. If the Heaven Wasteland Hall wanted to hold a swordsman selection, it should be held in the Heaven Wasteland City. The Heaven Wasteland City was at the foot of the Heaven Wasteland Mountain. It was a small city with a radius of only a few hundred miles. Such a city was considered very small in the Heaven Realm. Tian and the other two walked in the Heaven Wasteland City and went directly to the largest restaurant in the city, the Heaven Wasteland Restaurant, hoping to get some information. After entering the restaurant, the three found a relatively remote place and did not want to attract attention. Tian and the other two sat down, and after ordering a few things, they quietly listened to the discussions of others. The opening of the ancient sword tomb in the Heaven Wasteland Mountain is a grand event in the sword world. I'm afraid all the powerful swordsmen in the 5 domains will appear. Of course, if we can obtain the sword principal inheritance in the ancient sword tomb, it will definitely be a great opportunity. It is said that there were divine state swordsmen in the ancient times. Sword principal inheritance? How can it be so easy to get? The inheritance left behind from the ancient times is definitely not something that ordinary swordsmen can inherit. I don't want to get the inheritance. I'll be satisfied as long as I can get a rank 9 arch weapon or something magical. Ha ha. The group of swordsmen discussed with one another, and they were all very happy. Most of these swordsmen were young swordsmen under the age of 50. If a swordsman wanted to inherit the sword principal inheritance, the younger the better. The older the swordsman was, the more stable his sword intent would be, and it would not be easy for it to merge with other sword intents. Take Han Ling and Pu Fifan, for example. It was much easier for the latter to inherit the sword principal inheritance than the former. When Han Ling heard everyone's discussions, he could not help letting out a light sigh. He also knew that his age was on the older side. Even if he had the chance to enter the ancient sword tomb, it would be very hard to obtain the inheritance too. Tian noticed Han Ling's reaction. The corners of his mouth smiled slightly. If he could find a sword principal inheritance that was compatible with Han Ling's own sword intent attribute, his chances of inheriting the inheritance would increase greatly. At this time, the swordsmen in the restaurant became more and more. Gradually, it was overcrowded. "Brother, there's no one here, right? Give me a seat." Suddenly, a figure flashed and suddenly appeared, directly sitting down on a seat beside Tian, very impolite. Tian was slightly taken aback, looking at the arrival. This was a young swordsman around 27 or 28 years old. Handsome looks, eyes sharp, very sharp. But the corners of his mouth were curled askance, giving people a cynical feeling. Tian's divine sense swept over, a hint of surprise involuntarily flashing across in his eyes. This person actually had 5th-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Initial rank sword, profound meaning realm. This kind of strength could not be considered at the pinnacle among Heaven Realm swordsmen. But the crux was that his age was still less than 30 years old. The might of his sword Dao talent was astonishing. Chapter 1185. Pu Fifan clearly did not know this person's strength, and thought that the other was a frivolous young master who came to Tianwang City to join in the fun. He. That person did not get angry, but laughed and said, "Little brother, we are all swordsmen. Outside, we should tolerate each other. Junior brother, since this young master is willing to sit at the same table with us, why keep him at arm's length?" Han Ling sensed that the person in front of him was very strong and signaled Pu Fifan to calm down and not be impulsive. "Let him sit." Tian smiled faintly and glanced at that person. He did not expect that the other party was quite good with words. "Many thanks, big brothers." That person chuckled and said with clasped hands, "I am Xiao Yun. May I know how to address big brothers and this little brother?" "I am Han Ling. This is my junior brother Pu Fifan." Han Ling saw that Xiao Yun's personality was not bad, so he said with a smile, "Xiao Yun." When Tian heard this name, he suddenly looked at the other party and asked with a frown, "You are from 9 cold regions, Xiao family?" Tian remembered that 9 cold regions, Xiao family, had a person known as Xiao family's #1 genius in 1,000 years. He was called Xiao Yun and seemed to be about the same age as the person in front of him. Tian only heard Chuan Genie mention Xiao Yun occasionally. The latter went to Heaven Realm's divine realm several years ago, and his strength at that time was already first-level Heavenly Emperor. You know Shao family? Xiao Yun suddenly froze, his eyes flickered slightly, and he said in surprise, "You are also a martial artist from Nine Cold Region?" When Nye Tian saw Xiao Yun's reaction, his face involuntarily darkened. He indeed guessed correctly. Xiao Yun was from Nine Cold Region's Shao family. Nye Tian and Shao family had a very deep grudge. Even Shao family's 3 old ancestors died in his hands. He did not expect that he would actually encounter Xiao Yun under such circumstances. Furthermore, the latter was even a swordsman, and his strength actually reached such a level. After calming down, Nye Tian said coolly, "I am Nye Tian." Nye Tian. Good name. Xiao Yun muttered to himself for a moment before bursting into laughter. He poured himself a cup of tea and enjoyed it very much. Nye Tian glanced at Xiao Yun. It seemed that the latter didn't know that something had happened to the Shao family. He definitely hadn't returned to the Jilang region in years. Nye Tian saw that Xiao Yun's personality was very good. He wasn't a cruel and ruthless person. He was thinking about whether or not he should tell him about the Shao family. "Han Ling, they really are here." However, at this moment, a sharp voice rang out and several figures appeared. Hearing this voice, Nye Tian frowned slightly. He was all too familiar with this voice. It was Su Bo, who had just been humiliated by Han Ling. Su Bo's figure appeared. There were even several swordsmen standing behind him. One of them looked very similar to him, but his aura was even stronger. He actually had the strength of a 4th-level Heavenly Emperor. Furthermore, he was at the initial stage Sword Profundity realm. Nye Tian looked up. Half of Su Bo's face was covered by a mask, concealing the sword wound on his face. Right now, there were swordsmen everywhere in Tianwang City. Everyone knew what having a sword wound on one's face meant. He naturally didn't want others to see the sword wound on his face. "Quickly look, there's a good show to watch over here." The crowd's gazes were quickly drawn over. They all had heated expressions, already prepared to enjoy a good show. "Han Ling, it's you who injured my younger brother?" The person behind Su Bo took a step forward. His entire body released a powerful sword intent. He naturally couldn't say about the sword wound. He only said that Han Ling injured Su Bo. However, at this time, Pu Fifan stood up again and said loudly, "It's the humiliation of my senior brother leaving a sword wound on your younger brother's face. What do you want?" The humiliation of sword wound. When everyone heard these words, their gazes involuntarily trembled. They looked at Su Bo one after another. When they saw the mask on the latter's face, they instantly understood something. No wonder this person is wearing a mask. Turns out that someone left a sword wound on his face for the humiliation. The humiliation of sword wound is the greatest humiliation to a swordsman. If I were this person, I'd just die. This guy is really shameless. At least wait for the sword wound to disappear before coming out, right? Yeah, this kind of person also came to Heaven Desolation City. It wouldn't be that he has designs on the ancient sword tomb too, right? You're really shameless to the extreme. The crowd chimed in one after another. Their venomous gazes seemed to be able to penetrate Su Bo's mask, clearly seeing the humiliation of the sword wound on the latter's face. Half of Su Bo's face flushed red, wishing to find a hole in the ground to tunnel into. But his 2 eyes stared fixedly at Han Ling, his gaze surging with a vicious divine light. "Big brother, kill him for me." Finally, the fury in Su Bo's heart could not be contained anymore, directly roaring out. The person in front of him was his elder brother, Su Zhe. Su Bo guessed that Han Ling and the rest definitely returned to Heaven Desolation City and were extremely likely to come to Heaven Desolation Restaurant. Hence, after meeting up with Su Zhe, he directly came to Heaven Desolation Restaurant to find them. "Han Ling, you're courting death." Su Zhe was also infuriated, a cold glint in his eyes. Sword momentum suddenly bloomed around him, directly crushing over toward Han Ling. Su Zhe had 4th-level Heavenly Emperor strength and was very confident that he could one-shot Han Ling in one move. But he absolutely did not dare to kill Han Ling. No matter what, Han Ling was Qianjuan's disciple, killing him in front of so many people. If Mo Qianjun found out, it would bring a calamity to Sea of Observing Swords. Nie Tian had long expected Su Zhi to make a move, but he did not make a move. He just watched coldly by the side. Han Ling naturally could not be Su Zhi's match, but Xiaoyan absolutely did not fear Su Zhi. Bang! Su Zhi's entire body's sword momentum surged over. After a muffled thud, he actually directly flew out backward, smashing heavily onto the ground. What's going on? The crowd was stunned. It was clearly Su Zhi who made a move. Why was he sent flying back instead? No one saw how Xiaoyan made a move. There seemed to be a streak of sword light faintly flashing past. Then Su Zhi flew out backward. What a swift and fierce sword intent. Nie Tian's eyes slightly trembled. Of course, he could clearly see Xiaoyan's attack. It was extremely fast and extremely fierce, and it was obvious that Xiaoyan did not use his full strength. Otherwise, Su Zhi would already be a corpse. Who are you? Su Zhi struggled to get up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and looked at Xiaoyan with fear in his eyes. He was not too stupid. He knew that Xiaoyan had made a move to injure him. I'm just a person who wants to drink tea quietly. You've disturbed my mood, so I decided to teach you a lesson. Xiaoyan smiled faintly. As he spoke, he sipped on his tea with a playful smile in his eyes. You? Su Zhi saw that Xiaoyan didn't even put him in his eyes and couldn't help but feel greatly humiliated. He angrily roared, "Stinking brat, do you know that I am a person who watches Sea of Observing Swords?" Sea of Observing Swords. Hearing these 3 words, the crowd immediately exclaimed. Sea of Observing Swords was one of the 9 major sword sects, and none of the 9 major sword sects were easy to mess with. Sea of Observing Swords? Xiaoyan raised his eyebrows and smiled. He drank the tea in his hand in one gulp, and suddenly turned around to look at Su Zhi. He indifferently said, "Sorry, I have never heard of Sea of Observing Swords." The crowd was once again stunned. Countless gazes locked onto Xiaoyan. This brat was really too insolent. How could a swordsman from the Heaven Realm not have heard of Sea of Observing Swords? Xiaoyan obviously ignored Sea of Observing Swords. Your Excellency has such a big tone. Right at this moment, a low and sharp voice rang out, following which a figure soared through the sky and landed beside Su Zhi. Young Master. Su Zhi, Su Bo, and the others saw the person's face and simultaneously exclaimed. Chapter 1186. Qin Yang. Hearing Han Ling shout this name, Nie Tian's gaze involuntarily trembled, directly locking onto the newcomer. Qin Yang was precisely the person who left the humiliation of a sword scar on Han Ling's face. Nie Tian's pair of cold eyes stared fixedly at Qin Yang. The latter was a middle-aged martial artist, his physique tall and sturdy, very well built. Rage surged in both eyes, akin to an enraged lion. Nie Tian's divine sense swept over and immediately detected that Qin Yang's strength was 6th level Heavenly Emperor. His sword Dao realm reached middle rank sword profound meaning. Qin Yang's strength being so formidable slightly exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. Such strength was already a swordsman on the Heavenly Sword Storm list. That's him. At this time, Pu Fifan suddenly stood up, pointed at Qin Yang, and roared fiercely. A vicious divine light actually surged in his eyes. Nie Tian naturally understood the meaning of "that's him," but he was very calm, indicating for Pu Fifan to sit down. When Han Ling saw Qin Yang once more, the fury in his heart was indescribable. His entire person's blood and qi surged wildly, his entire body in a terrifying state. But Qin Yang's attention was not on Han Ling at this moment. His pair of cold eyes locked onto Xiaoyan. What are you staring at me for? Is there a problem? Is there something on my face? Xiaoyan's reaction was very calm. As he spoke, he poured tea and did not even look Qin Yang in the eye. His tone was also very mocking. This boy is so insolent, still so arrogant in front of sword-viewing Sea's young lord. The crowd's hearts trembled secretly. Xiaoyan actually ignored Qin Yang. There was a good show to watch now. Many people already recognized Qin Yang. Their gazes when looking at the latter were all trembling, carrying thick apprehension. Boy, you said that you haven't heard of sword viewing sea. This young lord will let you witness sword viewing seas, means right now. Qin Yang's expression was grim to the extreme, a pair of cold eyes suppressing anger. Since everyone already knew his identity, then what Xiao Yun provoked at this time was not him alone, but the entire sword viewing sea. If he did not make Xiao Yun pay a painful price today, others would even think that sword viewing sea was easy to bully. After Qin Yang finished speaking, a terrifying sword intent surged around him. It was actually a scarlet sword intent. It was like a flame burning around his body. In the next moment, it would explode with terrifying strength. In a private room on the second floor of the restaurant, two pairs of eyes were looking at Qin Yang and Xiao Yun with great interest. They were two old men. One was dressed in black, and the other was dressed in gray. Their auras were restrained to the extreme, but their eyes were sharp to the extreme. Brother Chun, who do you think has a higher chance of winning? The gray-clothed old man smiled faintly and asked with a sharp gaze. Of course it's our young master. The black-clothed old man answered without hesitation. That kid's strength and talent are not weak, but it's a pity that he's too young. He should be a swordsman on the Earth Sword ranking. How can he fight against a swordsman on the Heavenly Sword ranking? Oh, the gray-robed old man smiled playfully, but did not say anything. However, for some reason, his gaze shifted slightly and landed on a silver-haired martial artist. Qin Yang, the person you're looking for is me. It has nothing to do with this Gongzi. Just as Qin Yang was about to make a move, Han Ling suddenly spoke up. His eyes were filled with rage as he glared at Qin Yang. It's you again, trash. Qin Yang shot a cold glance at Han Ling and said loudly, You think that you can marry my little sister? You're a toad lusting after the flesh of a swan. Let me tell you, my little sister is already engaged to the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion's In Jiwei Gongzi. In a few days, In Gongzi will be coming to the Sea of Observing Swords to marry my little sister. Han Ling, you won't have a chance in this lifetime. After saying those words, Qin Yang glared at Han Ling venomously, as if waiting for the latter to break down and lose his composure. The reason why he had said all of this was to make Han Ling give up and crush his rationality. You won't have a chance in this lifetime. These words were like steel needles stabbing into Han Ling's heart, making him feel like he was suffocating. His chest felt so tight that he could not breathe. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his eyes became lifeless, as if he had lost all his will in an instant. Seeing this sight, Nie Tian bellowed furiously, Han Ling. Qin Yang was simply too vicious. Just a few words had left a huge psychological impact on Han Ling, and he was trying to crush his will once more. If Han Ling were to develop inner demons once more, it wouldn't be so easy for him to get rid of them. Nie Tian knew that the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion that Qin Yang spoke of was one of the 9 great sword sects in the Celestial Realm. Of the 9 great sword sects, it was second only to the Heaven Desolate Palace. It was a powerful sword sect that even the 9 god monarchs didn't dare to offend. However, Nie Tian had never heard of the name In Jiwei before. He guessed that In Jiwei should be a genius swordsman of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, and if he was not mistaken, he should be from the Ascendant Cloud Yin clan. It had to be said that Guan Jianhai was truly shameless. Back when Nie Tian was at his peak, he shamelessly proposed an engagement. But now that Nie Tian was in decline, not only did he break off the engagement, he even humiliated Han Ling. Then, he turned around and proposed an engagement with the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. In Jiwei. Upon hearing those 2 words, the crowd immediately exclaimed in astonishment. Their eyes burned with passion. The name In Jiwei was currently an influential figure in the Heaven Realm's Way of the Sword. He was ranked 29th on the Heavenly Sword's Wind and Cloud list. Furthermore, he had just been promoted from the number 1 person in the Earth Sword. He was in the limelight and was considered to be someone who could reach the peak of the Way of the Sword. He's Han Ling. At the same time, the eyes of the crowd also turned to look at Han Ling. They were extremely familiar with this name. After all, The latter had a teacher who had reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship, Mo Qianjun. So, he's Lord Mo Qianjun's useless disciple. It's said that a great teacher produces a great disciple, but that fellow has followed Lord Mo Qianjun for more than 100 years, and he can't even make it onto the heavenly sword edgeboard. He's really a disgrace to Lord Mo Qianjun. To think that he dares to snatch Lord Yin Jiwei's woman. If I were a woman, I would definitely choose Lord Yin Jiwei. One is a dragon from the ninth heaven. The other is a loach in a stinky ditch. Is there a need to choose? The crowd started discussing, and each of their words was more unpleasant than the other. Qin Yang stared at Han Ling strangely. The reason he said those words was to stir up the crowd's discussion and completely destroy Han Ling. Han Ling, you've heard everyone's words, right? At this moment, Qin Yang spoke again. He said coldly, "Previously, when you came to the Sea of Swords to propose marriage, I left a sword scar on your face. That's because you're trash and deserve to be humiliated. The reason why I didn't kill you is because I'm giving Lord Mo Qianjun face. You're Lord Mo Qianjun's disciple, but you can't even make it onto the heavenly sword edgeboard. The person you like is about to marry someone else. Your father is enduring the pain of having his soul refined in the horizon purgatory, but you can't do anything. You are a piece of trash from head to toe. If I were you, I would have killed myself." A low and suppressed voice resounded in Han Ling's ears. Chapter 1187. Nie Tian detected Qin Yang's intentions and immediately became nervous. If Han Ling really broke down because of a few words from him, that would be terrible. If Han Ling really committed suicide, even if Nie Tian made a move to stop it, that also showed that the former was already utterly disheartened. Wanting to recover Sword Dao will anew was very difficult. At this moment, countless people's gazes were looking at Han Ling, seemingly anticipating the scene of the latter brandishing his sword and committing suicide. Han Ling lowered his head and did not move at all. What? Don't even have the courage to commit suicide? Qin Yang laughed coldly, provoking Han Ling with words once more. He did not dare to kill Han Ling, but if the latter committed suicide in humiliation, then it was none of his business. Right at this time, Han Ling suddenly raised his head, terrifying determination flickering in his two eyes, staring fixedly at Qin Yang. A hint of a strange smile curled up at the corners of his mouth as he said solemnly, "People like me don't need courage to die. Only living needs courage. Even ants live without purpose, let alone that I'm still a person." Amen? Qin Yang detected the determination in Han Ling's eyes and was immediately stunned. He did not expect that the other party could still have the courage to carry on living under this kind of situation. When Nie Tian heard Han Ling's words, he heaved a long sigh in relief inwardly. Sometimes, dying was very simple. What was difficult was living on. When everyone was pessimistic about you, living on was the thing that required the most courage. Being able to see this point clearly, Han Ling's martial Dao will become stronger. Han Ling, looks like I underestimated you. Qin Yang's expression was extremely grim. Not being able to kill Han Ling made him very displeased. Suddenly, Han Ling's gaze flickered, and he said calmly, "Qin Yang, I, Han Ling, officially issue a life and death challenge to you today." Life and death challenge? The crowd's gazes suddenly trembled, disbelief on their faces, as if suspecting whether they heard wrongly or not. A second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist challenging a sixth-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Wasn't this courting death? Qin Yang was first stunned, then started laughing wildly, as if he heard a very hilarious joke. Han Ling, this is you courting death yourself. Can't blame this young lord. Qin Yang had enough laughing and said sinisterly, a pair of cold eyes releasing a malicious divine light. He did not dare to kill Han Ling in public, but if Han Ling took the initiative to challenge him and died in the life and death ring, then there would be no problem. With Mo Qianjun's personality, he would never cause trouble for Guan Jianhai. After all, life and death duels were all up to fate. No matter what happened, neither side could take revenge. Senior brother. Hu Fifan only reacted after a long time. and his small face was filled with astonishment. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect Han Ling to make such a move, but once he said it, there was no turning back. Qin Yang, in 2 months, you and I will fight to the death on the Sword Dao platform in Tianwang City. Life and death will be up to fate. Han Ling said in a deep voice, his face unusually firm. All right. Qin Yang smiled deeply. 2 months was just right. By that time, he would have probably come out of the ancient sword tomb, and his strength would have improved a lot. As for Han Ling, he didn't even have the qualifications to enter the ancient sword tomb. So what if his strength increased? 2 months. Nie Tian let out a long breath. Fortunately, Han Ling was not too impulsive. 2 months was enough for him to help Han Ling improve his strength. No matter what, Nie Tian would never let Han Ling die in the hands of Qin Yang. Han Ling, the matter between us will end here for now. Qin Yang glanced at Han Ling coldly, and then turned his eyes to Xiao Yun and said, Brat, it's time for the matter between us. Okay, how do you want to deal with it? Xiao Yun smiled faintly, looking indifferent. Xiao Yun completely stayed out of everything that had happened just now, as if it had nothing to do with him. Now, that Qin Yang had provoked him, of course, he could not continue to stay out of it. Brat, you have never heard of Guan Jianhai. This young master will let you see the method of Guan Jianhai. Qin Yang smiled coldly, and then his whole body soared intense sword. The crimson sword intent burned like a flame, and the surrounding space immediately became hot, directly turning into a furnace. Han Ling's eyes darkened. He wanted to say something, but was stopped by Nie Tian. The battle between Qin Yang and Xiao Yun. It was hard to say who would win and who would lose. Golden Sun Sword Intent. The crowd saw the crimson flames surging around Qin Yang and shouted. This was the Golden Sun Sword Intent of the Qin clan of Guan Jianhai. It was extremely terrifying, and it was an extremely rare bloodline sword intent. When the sword intent was strong to a certain extent, it could form a bloodline and be passed down through the bloodline. The Golden Sun Sword Intent of the Qin clan is a dual attribute sword intent of gold and fire. It is indeed true. Nie Tian faintly smiled as he felt the sword intent around Qin Yang. In addition to being a bloodline sword intent, the Golden Sun Sword Intent also had another strange characteristic, which was that it was a dual attribute sword intent, the hardness of metal and the heat of fire. The Golden Sun Sword Intent of the Qin clan? Interesting. Xiao Yun smiled faintly, still not putting Qin Yang in his eyes. Brat, you are courting death. Qin Yang's eyes darkened, and the anger in his eyes was replaced by murderous intent. He was the 51st swordsman on the Sky Sword ranking. How could he tolerate being looked down by a young swordsman? Boom! Qin Yang struck with his sword, and the void trembled slightly. The air became misty, and the surrounding space was suddenly tightened. A blazing flame whizzed out like a fire snake, attacking Xiao Yun. This was a restaurant, and the space was crowded. Qin Yang didn't use a huge sword move. Plus, he thought that killing Xiao Yun would only take one move, and there was no need for a huge sword move. Nie Tian was slightly nervous. If Xiao Yun couldn't block Qin Yang's sword, he, Han Ling, and the others might be affected. Xiao Yun was very calm, and he didn't use his sword. Instead, he struck with his palm, and suddenly a water curtain appeared in the air, forming a water shield, and absorbed Qin Yang's sword. Absorbed. It really absorbed Qin Yang's sword. This! The crowd couldn't help but gasp when they saw this, and they were so shocked that they couldn't say a word. How is this possible? Qin Yang was also stunned, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Here you go. Just at this moment, Xiao Yun's voice resounded. A fiery sword intent shot out from the water shield and attacked Qin Yang. Qin Yang was caught off guard, and he was slightly stunned. He struck out with his sword and blocked the flame sword essence, but he was blasted back a few steps and looked very embarrassed. The Golden Sun Sword essence is really not bad. Fierce enough. Xiao Yun smiled faintly and looked at Qin Yang with a ridiculing expression, full of provocation. The crowd was completely stunned at this time, and they looked at Xiao Yun dumbfoundedly. They had no idea what was going on. What was the water shield that Xiao Yun used? It was too strange, and it could actually absorb Qin Yang's sword essence, and it could also attack Qin Yang. This is... Qin Yang was stunned, and then he thought of something. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes, and he said with a trembling voice, "Still water, sword essence." Chapter 1188. Heavenly Wasteland Restaurant. In a private room on the second floor. The two old men looked surprised, evidently extremely shocked. The two did not expect that the legendary still water sword intent would appear again. It took a long time for the two to calm down and remain silent for a long time. Still water abyss, Shangguan clan. I didn't expect the appearance of the ancient sword tomb to alarm them. The gray-robed old man said in a low voice, his eyes flashing with a strange light. No wonder this boy can reach such strength at such a young age. He is from the Shangguan clan of the still water abyss. It seems that the opening of the ancient sword tomb has alarmed a lot of people. The black-robed old man's face was gloomy. The corners of his mouth curved into a strange smile from time to time, as if he was thinking about something. Downstairs, the crowd was still in a daze, unable to react for a long time. The scene just now was too strange. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. "Boy, you are." Qin Yang finally calmed down a little, but his voice was still trembling. "You are from the Shangguan clan of the still water abyss. I didn't know that you know quite a lot." Xiao Yun smiled faintly, took a sip of tea, and said, "I am indeed from the still water abyss, but I am not from the Shangguan clan." "Not from the Shangguan clan?" Qin Yang was taken aback. "Then how do you know the still water sword intent?" "This is my business. Do I need to tell you?" Xiao Yun smiled faintly, a calm look on his face. Qin Yang's pupils suddenly shrank, not knowing what to say. At this moment, Nie Tian looked at Xiao Yun. The corners of his mouth curved in a faint smile. He didn't expect Xiao Yun to be from the still water abyss. This was interesting. The still water abyss was one of the 9 major sword sects, but it had disappeared for many years, and even in Nie Tian's previous life, swordsmen of the still water abyss rarely appeared. The appearance of Xiao Yun indicated that the still water abyss had reappeared and seemed to be interested in the ancient sword tomb. The still water sword intent was a very strange sword intent. It was rumored that when cultivated to the extreme, one could absorb any sword intent, copy any sword intent, and use it for oneself. Just now, Xiao Yun had used the still water sword intent to absorb Qin Yang's golden sun sword intent, and then copied the golden sun sword intent to counterattack Qin Yang. Nie Tian had only heard of the still water sword intent before, but had never seen it before. Now that he saw it, it was indeed very strange. Xiao Yun's strength was below Qin Yang's, and his sword Dao realm was also below Qin Yang's. However, he was able to directly absorb and copy Qin Yang's sword intent. It was truly strange. At this time, Nie Tian also understood. Xiao Yun had only been in the heaven realm for a few years, yet his strength could rise so quickly. It was definitely because of the still water abyss. It had to be said that Xiao Yun's luck was very good to actually be able to join the still water abyss. Qin Yang's eyes shone brightly. Evidently, he was considering whether or not he should continue attacking. The still water sword intent was too strange. He was not sure that he could defeat Xiao Yun, and if he left now, it would seem very cowardly. "Xiao Yun." Right at this moment, a clear voice suddenly resounded. "Oh no!" When Xiao Yun heard this voice, he was shocked, like a mouse seeing a cat. The crowd was taken aback for a moment, then turned their eyes to the source of the voice. A figure in purple appeared. It was a young woman in her 20s, with beautiful facial features and a heroic spirit. "Xiao Yun, you married me, Shangguan Yufei, so you are a member of the Shangguan family. Why do you say that you are not a member of the Shangguan family?" The figure of the woman in purple flickered, coming directly to Xiao Yun's side. The crowd was stunned. This woman was too fierce. No wonder Xiao Yun was so frightened just now. Nie Tian twitched the corner of his mouth. His eyes swept over Shangguan Yufei, and secretly said in his heart, "This girl left. She is more overbearing than Gu Wuyo." "Yufei, I am your person, but my surname is Xiao, not Shangwan. Xiao Yun was obviously very afraid of Shangwan Yufei, and said with a sullen face, "If you are my person, then you are a member of the Shangwan family. What's the difference?" Shangwan Yufei's pretty face was gloomy, and she glared at Xiao Yun. "It's the same. If you say it's the same, then it's the same." Xiao Yun looked at Qin Yang helplessly. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I am a member of the Abyss of Still Water, and also a member of the Shangwan family." Qin Yang had a face full of black lines, completely unable to react. The person who used the still water sword intent to embarrass him just now was actually so afraid of his wife. That's more like it. Shangwan Yufei saw that Xiao Yun's attitude of admitting his mistake was not bad, and could not help smiling sweetly, her smile like a flower. Nie Tian looked at the two people in front of him with a speechless look. This was really a pair of weirdos. In fact, Shangwan Yufei's strength was not strong. Only 3rd level Heavenly Emperor, and her Sword Dao realm was also only Sword Soul. Xiao Yun was so afraid of her, obviously because he loved her. "All right, let's go." Shangwan Yufei smiled, not wanting to stay here, and pulled Xiao Yun and prepared to leave. "Big brother Han Ling, brother Nie Tian, brother Pu Fifan, I'll take my leave." Xiao Yun stood up, very seriously bidding farewell to Nie Tian and the others, and then left with Shangwan Yufei. The crowd looked at the two figures with a speechless look. Nie Tian shook his head and smiled, also feeling that these two people were very interesting in his heart. When Qin Yang saw that Xiao Yun had left, he didn't want to stay any longer. He glanced coldly at Han Ling and said in a deep voice, "Han Ling, the life and death duel in 2 months will be the day you die." Finished talking, Qin Yang left. Nie Tian did not stop it. With his current strength, if he wanted to kill Qin Yang, he could kill him, but he did not want to do so, because this person had to be dealt with by Han Ling himself. Furthermore, Nie Tian already discovered that in a private room on the 2nd floor, 2 old men with powerful auras were watching everything. If Nie Tian made a move, it was very likely to expose his identity. Before entering the ancient sword tomb, Nie Tian tried not to make a move unless it was a last resort. Next, Nie Tian also did not plan to continue staying. These people looked at Han Ling with strange gazes. Although he did not care, it would also annoy him. The 3 left the Heavenly Wasteland restaurant, ready to find a place to stay, and wait for the news from the Heavenly Wasteland city to determine the people who entered the ancient sword tomb. This time, when the ancient sword tomb opened, even a hidden sword sect like the Abyss of Still Water appeared, so other swordsmen would definitely flock to the ancient sword tomb. The Heavenly Wasteland city would definitely have an extremely fierce sword principle competition. At this time, Pu Fifan pointed at several figures in front of them and shouted, "Senior brother, look, it's eldest senior brother and the others." Nie Tian looked over and saw several figures appear in front of them, led by a middle-aged man with a lean figure. His aura was restrained, but it still could not hide his sharp aura. His whole person looked like a sharp sword, extremely swift and fierce. "Ignore them." Han Ling frowned, but he did not want to pay attention to the people in front of him and intended to go around them. Han Ling, however, it was already too late. The lean middle-aged man saw Han Ling and the others and shouted, "You want to run after seeing eldest senior brother? Do you hate me, eldest senior brother?" Chapter 1189. The skinny middle-aged man walked over with a gloomy face. He looked at Han Ling with disdain, as if Han Ling was not his junior brother, but his enemy. Looking at the skinny middle-aged man's expression, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown and ask Pu Fifan, "Pu Fifan, is this your eldest senior brother?" "Yes, he is our eldest senior brother, Lu Haoyu." Pu Fifan nodded. It seemed that he didn't like this eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother. Han Ling nodded and bowed. He greeted Lu Haoyu. No matter what, Lu Haoyu was his senior brother, and he had to show him respect. "Han Ling, teacher asked you to come to Tianwang City to gain experience, not to make a fool of yourself." Lu Haoyu looked at Han Ling coldly and said in a deep voice, his face full of disdain and contempt, "Eldest senior brother, what do you mean?" Han Ling raised his head slightly. Even if Lu Haoyu was his senior brother, he couldn't say that to him. "What do I mean? Lu Haoyu looked down and said, "You challenged Qin Yang to a life-and-death duel. Aren't you disgracing yourself? You're the only one who's throwing away the sect's face. I don't understand why teacher asked you to come to the Tianwang Mountain." Nie Tian frowned. Lu Haoyu was talking about Han Ling's life-and-death duel with Qin Yang. The news spread fast. Lu Haoyu knew it as soon as Nie Tian and the others came out of the Tianwang restaurant. Actually, it was not strange. This kind of thing was spread from mouth to mouth. Soon, all the swordsmen in the Tianwang city knew about it. "Eldest senior brother, this is my own business. It has nothing to do with the sect." Han Ling was angry, but he said calmly, "How dare you say it has nothing to do with the sect?" Lu Haoyu raised his eyebrows and said cold, "If you die in the hands of Qin Yang, all the swordsmen in the sword world will think that teacher's disciple can't beat the sword ocean. Isn't that a disgrace to teacher?" Han Ling felt suffocated. He couldn't vent his anger, so he didn't know how to defend himself. If he lost the duel with Qin Yang, it would damage Mo Qianjuan's reputation. "Eldest senior brother, you can't say that about senior brother Han." At this time, Pu Fifan couldn't stand it anymore and said, "As the eldest senior brother, you only know how to blame senior brother Han when he was humiliated and never thought of avenging him. Is this what an eldest senior brother should do?" Pu Fifan was young, but his words were powerful and resonant. If Lu Haoyu truly cared about the sect's reputation, he would defeat Qin Yang and reclaim the sect's reputation. However, he only knew how to blame Han Ling. What kind of eldest brother was he? Qin Yang had humiliated Han Ling, but Mo Qianjuan's status was different. He was a senior in the way of the sword. Of course, he couldn't do anything to Qin Yang. However, Lu Haoyu and Qin Yang were of the same generation. Why couldn't he do anything to Han Ling? Nie Tian could tell that Lu Haoyu's strength was also a 6th-level heavenly emperor. Furthermore, he was similarly at the middle-rank sword profound realm, the same strength as Qin Yang. Why did he not dare to fight the latter? "Pu Fifan, how can you talk to me like that?" Lu Haoyu was agitated by Pu Fifan's few words. His face immediately turned red. Following that, an ice-cold gaze stared at the latter and said coldly, "I'm your eldest senior brother. You must respect me. You follow by Han Ling's side every day. What prospect will you have when you grow up? Aren't you still the same as him, becoming a cripple and can't even marry the woman you love? Lu Haoyu, I forbid you to speak of senior brother Han Ling like this." Pu Fifan's gaze darkened, and he immediately became enraged, glaring fiercely at Lu Haoyu. In his heart, Han Ling was more like a senior brother than all the other senior brothers. "Pu Fifan, are you rebelling?" Lu Haoyu detected the fury in Pu Fifan's eyes and roared solemnly, "You dare to glare at me? This is showing no respect for elders. As the eldest senior brother, I'll teach you a lesson on teacher's behalf today. Kneel down for me." With a violent roar, Lu Haoyu's entire body released a massive oppressive aura, directly enveloping over toward Pu Fifan. "No!" Han Ling sensed something amiss and immediately cried out in shock. Even if Pu Fifan was just a child, kneeling in front of so many people was also a kind of blow to his sword Dao willpower. Lu Haoyu, as the eldest senior brother, Pu Fifan could kneel down for him, but absolutely not under this kind of situation. Enough! Right at this time, a furious roar sounded out. Nie Tian suddenly took a step out, sword momentum surging all over his body, akin to a hazy abyss breaking, directly breaking through Lu Haoyu's aura oppression. Amen? Lu Haoyu's gaze trembled slightly. Suffering the impact of the aura, he actually could not resist taking several steps back, his expression ugly to the extreme. "You? Who are you?" Lu Haoyu stabilized his figure. His gaze when looking at Nie Tian carried thick apprehension. In that instant just now, he actually felt a terrifying aura rise, making him feel a terrifying threat. When he sensed that Nie Tian's strength was only 4th-level Heavenly Emperor, he panicked even more instead. Not only did a 4th-level Heavenly Emperor break through his aura oppression, but he even directly blasted him back instead. It was seriously too bizarre. "Han Ling, let's go." Nie Tian completely ignored Lu Haoyu. His gaze swept over the surrounding people. and he turned around, preparing to leave. He did not wish to continue being entangled. He would only let people see a joke. Lu Haoyu was Mo Qianjuan's disciple. It was naturally impossible for Nie Tian to kill him. But this person made him very angry and could not be bothered to care. Amen. Han Ling nodded slightly and also prepared to leave. Lu Haoyu was the eldest senior brother after all. Those words that he said, Han Ling treated it as if he did not hear it. The three people immediately turned around and left. Bastard! Seeing that Nie Tian did not pay attention to him from start to end, Lu Haoyu felt that he suffered a tremendous humiliation. He suddenly roared angrily. The sword intent in his entire body suddenly erupted, directly condensing into a swift and fierce sword shadow, assaulting Nie Tian. The Heaven Realm's Divine Realm streets were all very wide, several hundred meters wide, accommodating martial artists to fight. Lu Haoyu's sword struck out. A terrifying sword shadow, close to 1,000 meters long, appeared. The limestone slabs on the ground directly shattered. The crowd felt the terrifying sword aura burst forth, quickly scattering to both sides. Be careful! Han Ling felt a fierce cold wind behind him and could not help crying out in shock. He did not expect that Lu Haoyu would actually really make a move on a fellow disciple. Amen. Nie Tian's brows tightened, the blood and qi in his body surging, his expression grim until it made one's heart palpitate. He originally did not want to fuss over it with Lu Haoyu, but the latter was too much to actually attack in public. He really did not understand why Mo Qianjun, who was wise all his life, would take in such a muddle-headed disciple. Brat, since you don't know what's good for you, then I'll teach you a little lesson on Mo Qianjuan's behalf. Nie Tian's heart suddenly sank, and he said coldly. Following that, surging sword intent gushed out from his body, turning around and stabbing out with the sword. A clear sword hum sounded out. The void trembled slightly. Billowing sword intent roared out. Terrifying sword shadows appeared in the air, fiercely pouncing out. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying power of the sword will erupted, and the destructive power burst forth, directly tearing apart and destroying the other sword shadow. Boom! The moment Nie Tian's figure turned around, the sword shadow landed a few meters above Lu Haoyu's head. Chapter 1190. Nie Tian's sword landed, directly destroying Lu Haoyu's sword, the sword shadow stopping above the latter's head. The scene that suddenly happened made the scene fall into deathly silence. Everyone's gazes looked at Nie Tian dumbfoundedly, a dumbfounded expression. Completely unable to believe that a fourth-level Heavenly Emperor-strength swordsman could actually erupt with such terrifying power under one sword. Lu Haoyu's figure froze, his entire body drenched in cold sweat, his face dumbfounded. Even if he was any dumber, he also knew that Nie Tian's sword clearly showed mercy. If this sword landed, his outcome would absolutely be even more tragic than that sword shadow. Not even dregs would remain. But Lu Haoyu was really very surprised. Earlier, he clearly did not sense any sword intent surging aura on Nie Tian's body. Why was the latter able to release such a horrifying power in an instant? Under normal circumstances, swordsmen had to accumulate sword intent and essence energy before unleashing the sword. Although this process was very short, it was indispensable. Nie Tian seemed to have directly unleashed the sword and did not need to accumulate sword intent and essence energy at all. It was too bizarre. This person's means are so terrifying. After a moment, the crowd also discovered something amiss, their gazes becoming strange one after another. Most of the people present were swordsmen, but they completely did not understand this sword of Nie Tian's. Han Ling and Pu Fifan were the closest to Nie Tian and completely did not sense anything either, not knowing how Nie Tian did it. The power of the Dark Star ghostly kill is indeed terrifying. At this time, the corners in Nie Tian's mouth curled up slightly, secretly thinking to himself. He had long sensed that Lu Haoyu would make a move, so he used the Dark Star ghostly kill in advance. And he discovered that not only was the Dark Star ghostly kill soundless by itself, It even fused together with the sword intent and could greatly conceal the sword intent undulations, making the sword intent converge to the extreme. A sword that fused with the dark star ghostly kill directly routed Lu Haoyu. Soundless, very terrifying. Such a sword, if used in a real life and death battle, it's absolutely fatal. Nie Tian was considerably shocked in his heart and became even more confident in the power of the dark star ghostly kill. By relying on the dark star ghostly kill, he could even instantly one-shot 6th level Heavenly Emperor, even 7th level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Lu Haoyu's strength was already very strong, on the same level as Qin Yang, but he was still routed by Nie Tian in one move. Lu Haoyu. Nie Tian withdrew his sword intent, and the sword shadow above Lu Haoyu's head disappeared. He said coldly, "Even though you're the eldest senior brother, you don't act like one at all. When something happened, you blame junior brother for being trash and useless, but you don't think about seeking justice for junior. A senior brother like you are less than dog." After uttering these cold words, Nie Tian didn't want to stay any longer. He turned around and left. Han Ling and Pu Fifan were stunned for a moment. When they regained their senses, they immediately left. The crowd stared at Nie Tian's disappearing figure with astonishment and shock. "Tian," Lu said. Lu Haoyu stood rooted to the ground, and it took him a long time to react. He opened his mouth in a daze, and the expression in his eyes became complicated. Lu Haoyu asked in his mind. He seemed to be in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. A questioning voice sounded in his heart, and his expression was somewhat dazed. It was unknown whether he was questioning or reflecting on himself. After Nie Tian and the other two left, they walked on the street with a heavy atmosphere. "Senior brother, will Tian be okay?" Pu Fifan asked worriedly, breaking the silence. Although Lu Haoyu was in the wrong, he was the Tian, after all. Nie Tian's sword just now was a big blow to him, so Pu Fifan was worried. "Don't worry, I believe Tian will understand," Han Ling said, but there was some worry in his eyes. Actually, Lu Haoyu wasn't a bad person. It was just that the way he handled things was wrong. I hope he can repent. If he can't even bear this little responsibility, he doesn't have to be the Tian, Nie Tian said plainly and stopped thinking about Lu Haoyu. Only now did he realize that Han Ling had a hard time all these years. If it weren't for him, Han Fei wouldn't have been captured and Han Ling wouldn't have suffered so much. Thinking of this, Nie Tian couldn't help but feel guilty. "Senior brother, what's in front?" At this moment, Pu Fifan suddenly cried out in surprise and pointed to the front. Nie Tian and Han Ling looked over at the same time. There were many people gathered on a huge square in front of them. It was very lively. Nie Tian and the other two immediately walked over, and everyone's eyes were attracted by notice. Sword Principal Competition. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw the 4 words written on the notice. It turned out that this was a notice posted by the Tianwang city. The general idea was that in order to determine the swordsman who could enter the ancient sword tomb, the Tianwang city was going to organize a sword principal competition with the other major sword sections. The top 100 swordsmen in the competition would be qualified to enter the ancient sword tomb. The sword principal competition this time wasn't just a simple sword principal competition. All the participating swordsmen would enter a designated area in the Tianwang mountain range, the forbidden area of Tianwang. They would kill each other, and only 100 people would survive. What a cruel method! Nie Tian's eyes darkened after reading the notice. In order to enter the ancient sword tomb, countless swordsmen would participate in the sword principal competition, but only 100 swordsmen would be allowed to survive. This was no different from letting all the swordsmen gamble with their lives. Of course, one could directly give up after entering the forbidden area of Tianwang, but who would give up so easily in order to enter the ancient sword tomb? This method of competition is indeed too cruel. Han Ling's eyes darkened as he said, "If there are cruel and bloodthirsty swordsmen participating in the competition, if they are strong enough, wouldn't they be able to kill at will?" "Yes." Pu Fifan also nodded and said with a conflicted expression, "Teacher said that some people cultivate the demon sword, which is a sword that specializes in killing people. The more people they kill, the stronger the sword intent. Yet Tion's eyes flickered. He didn't expect the 9 major sword sects to become so bloodthirsty. If it was to confirm the quota to enter the ancient sword tomb, it could be decided through martial arts. Why did they have to create such a sword principle competition? This was simply a sword principle competition for life. A conservative estimate was that there were tens of thousands of swordsmen who came to Tianwang Mountain. Were they going to put all these Wanjian swordsmen into the forbidden area of Tianwang Mountain, and only 100 people could come out alive? After the other swordsmen understood, they all looked indignant and criticized this method for being too cruel. Swordsmen have to kill people. Only by practicing a sword that kills can one be worthy of the sharpness of the sword. If you don't even have the courage to participate in the sword principle competition, what qualifications do you have to enter the ancient sword tomb? The sword principle competition is a game for the brave. You cowards, it's better not to participate. At this time, a different voice sounded. It was low and deep, but the voice seemed to have a magical power, resounding in everyone's ears. It was abnormally clear and as sharp as a sword. The crowd was suddenly stunned and looked at the person who spoke. It was a demonic man in a silver robe. His face was extremely gloomy, and his whole body was filled with a violent, murderous intent. This person was so arrogant, calling everyone cowards as soon as he opened his mouth. Chapter 1191. Yin Jiwei. When the crowd heard this name, their eyes couldn't help but tremble. So, the person who spoke was Yin Jiwei. No wonder he was so arrogant and ruthless. Yin Jiwei. At this moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He had heard this name once before, and he remembered it very clearly. Yin Jiwei was from the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, and he was already engaged to Qin Yang's younger sister, Qin Yu. It was said that Yin Jiwei was once the number 1 swordsman of the Earth Sword, and he was ranked 29th on the Heavenly Sword ranking. Nie Tian saw that Yin Jiwei was just over 100 years old, similar to Han Ling. It was indeed very impressive for him to be ranked 29th on the Heavenly Sword ranking at this age. Especially when compared to Han Ling, the gap between the two was really huge. It's him. Han Ling's eyes trembled slightly. Although he had never seen Yin Jiwei before, he knew the latter's relationship with Qin Yu. Seeing this person acting so arrogantly, it was easy to imagine how he felt. A bunch of ants. Yin Jiwei's gaze was cold as he looked at the crowd disdainfully. He berated without any scruples and prepared to turn around and leave. In his eyes, these swordsmen around him were not worthy of the title of swordsman at all. At most, they were a bunch of ant-like swordsmen, being looked down upon by Yin Jiwei. Everyone was infuriated, but they dared not say anything. They could only look at Yin Jiwei's departing figure hatefully. Yin Jiwei was arrogant, but he had the strength to be arrogant. His capabilities were already very terrifying, and with the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion behind him, there were only a handful of people who dared to provoke him. You call everyone ants? Aren't you being a little too arrogant? Just as Yin Jiwei's figure left, a discordant voice sounded. There was a hint of mockery in it. This voice was not loud, but everyone's gazes turned over. They saw that the person who spoke was a middle-aged swordsman in gray robes. He held a black broadsword in his hand and appeared very mighty. Nie Tian looked at the gray-robed swordsman. The latter was not weak. He was actually a 5th-level heavenly emperor, and he had reached the intermediate sword profundity realm. Yin Jiwei's eyes darkened slightly. He then turned around and looked at the gray-robed swordsman sternly. He sneered. Ant, repeat what you just said. So what if I say it again? The gray-robed swordsman was rather hot-blooded as he growled in a deep voice. Aren't you being too arrogant by treating all the swordsmen here as ants? Don't think that no one will dare to touch you, just because you have the backing of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. This is Tianwang City. No matter how powerful your Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion is, there's no way you can extend your claws here. When the crowd heard the gray-robed swordsman's words, they all nodded in agreement. Yin Jiwei's arrogance was too much, and he had provoked the public's anger. Really, however, Yin Jiwei did not care about the reactions of the others. He stared coldly at the gray-robed swordsman. A terrifying killing intent spread through the air, and everyone present felt a suffocating pressure. Courting death. Suddenly, In Jiwei's figure moved, and then a strand of murderous sword intent whistled out. It actually condensed into a silver human silhouette in midair, and it flickered like a ghost. Bang! The air trembled slightly, and after a muffled bang, the gray-robed swordsman was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, he had become a headless corpse. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before anyone could understand what was going on, the gray-robed swordsman was already strangely decapitated. What was even more bizarre was that what flowed out from the gray-robed swordsman's head was not crimson blood, but silver blood. It was as if his blood had been contaminated by the silver sword intent, turning it silvery white. In Jiwei's sword was swift to the extreme, and it was merciless and murderous. It caught everyone off guard. No one expected In Jiwei to kill someone under the watchful eyes of the public, and even more so, no one expected his sword to be so bizarre. Silver, soul, sword intent. When Yetian saw this scene by the side, his gaze couldn't help but tremble. He recognized that what In Jiwei released was the silver soul sword intent, the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion's In clan's bloodline sword intent. Silver Soul Sword intent instantly killed a 5th-level Heavenly Emperor expert with a single strike. It was truly terrifying. This person's Silver Soul Sword intent is very unique. It seems to have undergone some kind of mutation, and it's actually even sharper and more bizarre than the Silver Soul Sword intent of Solitary Silver City. Nietian secretly said in his heart. He could sense that In Jiwei's Silver Soul Sword intent was different from ordinary Silver Soul Sword intent. It was more murderous and sharp, and its power was even more terrifying. Solitary Silver City was precisely the pavilion master of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. Nietian had exchanged blows with this person before, and by relying on the Proud Sword Art's forbidden 3 moves, he gained a slight advantage. In Jiwei's appearance bore some resemblance to Solitary Silver City. He should be his son. In Jiwei was not old. Although he was already over 100 years old, he was still very young for martial artists. To be able to cultivate such a terrifying silver soul sword intent at this age, In Jiwei's sword Dao talent was indeed astonishing. And In Jiwei glanced at the corpse on the ground cold, smiled disdainfully, and said, "This is the consequence of talking too much." After saying that, In Jiwei's gaze swept across everyone and said, "Let me tell you guys, I, In Jiwei, don't need any big tree to support me. If anyone disapproves of my way of doing things, feel free to speak up. This person is an example." When the icy, cold voice landed, everyone was silent like cicadas in winter. The scene was dead silent, without any sound at all. In Jiwei could even one-shot the gray-clothed swordsman with one sword. The rest's strength was basically inferior to the gray-clothed swordsman. How could they dare to show any dissatisfaction? A bunch of ants. Don't even have the courage to open your mouths and speak. Letting you all enter the ancient sword tomb is simply an insult to the ancient sword tomb. When In Jiwei saw that everyone did not speak, he could not help becoming even more insolent, sneering coldly over and over again. Yet Tian frowned slightly as he watched by the side, but did not make a move. In Jiwei's strength was 7th-level Heavenly Emperor, his sword Dao strength reaching high-rank sword profound meaning. He could be considered a pinnacle swordsman. If Nietian made a move rashly, he did not have confidence in defeating the latter. But the most important thing was that he did not wish to expose his identity. A violent and savage person like In Jiwei, if he entered Heaven Wasteland's forbidden region, he would definitely go on a killing spree, killing one on sight. Nietian reckoned that among the swordsmen who participated in the Sword Dao struggle, there were absolutely few whose strength could contend with In Jiwei. In Jiwei was the 29th person on the Heavenly Sword Storm list. Apart from those old monsters who had concealed for a long time, he was virtually the Heaven Realm's Sword Dao's 29th swordsman. Such strength was indeed troublesome. People like Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng, these people were naturally disdainful to take part in whatever sword Dao struggle. Hence, in the sword Dao struggle, those able to beat Yin Ji Wei were scanty few. Letting Yin Ji Wei into Heaven Wasteland's forbidden region was simply releasing a homicidal maniac. In the Heaven realm, swordsmen like Yin Ji Wei had no idea how many. Thinking up to here, Nietian could not help shaking his head slightly. Looks like the sword Dao struggle this time was destined to be a bloody storm. Second uncle. But right at this time, a clear voice suddenly sounded out. Following that, a figure rushed out from the crowd. It was actually a 15 or 16 years old youth. Chapter 1192. The youth suddenly rushed out, a deep, angry roar reverberating out akin to a clap of thunder. The rage in his entire body flared up. Flames seemed to be surging around his body, burning the surrounding air. Fire attribute, sword intent. The crowd's gazes trembled slightly, immediately recognizing that this youth was a swordsman too. Furthermore, it was fire attribute, sword intent. The power of the sword intent was even very horrifying. And right at this time, when Yetian saw the fire attribute sword intent on this youth's body, his gaze could not help suddenly turning sluggish, his expression somewhat stiff. The big ant is dead, and here comes another small ant? At the same time, Injue's gaze looked at that flame-like youth coldly, undisguised killing intent surging in his eyes. The crowd sensed a sharp killing intent appearing in the space, their hearts involuntarily trembling. They all knew that this flame youth was going to die. Injiwei was ruthless and bloodthirsty. How could he allow this youth to live? This child is only 15 or 16 years old, and his strength is actually second-level Heavenly Emperor. The fire attribute sword intent on his body is also very horrifying. If he dies just like this, it's truly a pity. Quite a few people suddenly noticed that the flame youth's strength was very horrifying and could not help saying regretfully. 15 or 16 years old, second-level Heavenly Emperor strength, Sword Dao realm reaching Sword Soul, it was seriously very terrifying. Nietian also noticed this. This youth's Sword Dao talent was actually not beneath Pu Fifan's. Pu Fifan was only 12 years old currently. Wait another 3 or 4 years. He might not have the flame youth strength either. Little bastard, your strength and talent are both pretty good. It's a pity that you ran into me. Inji Wei similarly detected the flame youth's strength, the coldness in his eyes becoming even thicker. The stronger the latter's talent, the thicker his killing intent. Such a youth, if he continued to grow, that would be terrifying. Injiwei looked at the flame youth and smiled cold, revealing killing intent. It's you who killed my second uncle. I want your life. The flame youth immediately reacted. It was precisely this silver-clothed swordsman in front of him who killed his second uncle. Immediately, all the sword intent in his body suddenly erupted, a crimson flame longsword appearing in his hand. The sword intent around him gushed out explosively, turning into endless flames, burning in the space. The surrounding crowd actually could not withstand the roasting of this blazing flame, retreating and scattering one after another. A little ant dares to be so arrogant. Die. Injiwei smiled coldly. The silver soul sword intent appeared around his body, and actually surged in clusters, extremely strange, like a silver ghost. He didn't even need to draw his sword to kill an ant like the flaming youth. Die! In the next moment, the cold voice fell, and the silver spirit's sword essence appeared again. It was like a sharp silver blade, flickering with a cold light, filled with murderous evil intent, and attacked the flaming young man. Be careful! At this moment, the hearts of the crowd suddenly tightened. Their hearts trembled violently. Such a talented young man had died so tragically. What a pity. I'll kill you. The flaming youth was actually fearless. He stabbed out with his scarlet flame longsword, and a line of fire appeared. It extended into a long scarlet flame, snake in the air. It was several hundred meters long, and it rolled towards Injiwei. However, the flaming youth's strength was too weak. The flaming snake was directly torn apart by the silver sharp blade. The life-demanding blade struck out, instantly plunging the flaming youth into a moment of life and death. Right at the moment of imminent peril, a streak of starlight appeared and suddenly emerged and actually enveloped the flaming youth. The stars around him formed a human-shaped starlight shield. Bang! When a silver-sharp blade landed, a muffled sound rang out. It was actually unable to breach that starlight shield. The flaming youth was forced back several steps, but he was perfectly unscathed and not injured. When the crowd saw this scene, they were stunned one after another and did not react to it for a long time. Amen. Wei's gaze trembled too. He did not expect that someone actually made a move at this time, blocking a fatal blow for the flaming youth. It's you. The next instant, Wei suddenly turned his head back, gaze glued onto a silver-haired youth. It was precisely Nie Tian. Nie Tian took a step forward, his figure moving, blocking between Wei and the flaming youth as he said coolly, "So what if it's me?" Just now, it was precisely him who used the Heavenly Star Guardian to block the silver sharp blade for the flaming youth. Fortunately, he had the Heavenly Star Guardian. Otherwise, it would be very hard to block Wei's fatal sword. The Heavenly Star Guardian's defensive power was indeed strong enough, able to block the attack of a Seventh Firmament Heavenly Emperor Sword Master head-on. But this also expended the stellar power that Nie Tian was sizing up. With the stellar power that he currently awakened, he could at most use the Heavenly Star Guardian 3 times. The flaming youth was a very hard-to-come-by sword Dao genius. Nie Tian seriously could not bear for him to die tragically like this. Furthermore, more importantly, the sword intent that this flaming youth released was precisely the Crimson Flame sword intent. Crimson Flame sword intent. This was the sword intent that the Crimson Flame Fiend Palace's Palace Lord, Lu Molu, used back then. Nie Tian had a Crimson Flame token in his hands. Returning to the Heaven Realm's divine realm this time, he still had an important matter to find the Crimson Flame Fiend Palace's people. He even guessed that Lu Molu might know his parentage. The flaming youth possessed the Crimson Flame sword intent. Nie Tian guessed that this youth was very likely related to the already destroyed Crimson Flame Fiend Palace. This was also another reason why he made a move to save people. "Brat, for you to be able to block my sword, very good. Looks like there will be a rather interesting massacre today." The corners of Wei's mouth curled up as he spoke with a playful expression. In his opinion, killing people was completely a kind of game. The killing game just now was too boring. His opponent was completely unable to withstand a single blow. Only with Nie Tian's appearance did this game become a little more interesting. At this time, the crowd's gazes shifted from the flaming youth to Nie Tian. Their gazes were all incomparably astonished. For Nie Tian to make a move to save people at this time was practically an act of courting death. Wei killed people without batting an eyelid. He didn't care about killing one more person. Wei, right? Nie Tian's expression was as calm as water, without the slightest ripple. He said indifferently, "Even solitary Silver City wasn't this arrogant back then. Looks like your family is getting more arrogant with each generation." And hearing Nie Tian suddenly mention the name Solitary Silver City, Wei's eyes trembled violently, because Solitary Silver City was his father. "Stinking brat, is my father's name also what you can call?" Wei roared angrily, all the killing intent in his body released, condensing in a surging pressure, enveloping over toward Nie Tian. "Careful, mister." When Han Ling saw this scene, he could not help crying out, his complexion ashen as a sheet, bean-sized sweat beads seeping out of his forehead. He knew Nie Tian's identity, but the latter's strength was far inferior to Wei's. How could he possibly be Wei's match? Solitary Silver City is the Heaven Realm's divine realm's taboo, even doesn't allow others to shout? Nie Tianling replied coldly, his body trembling, directly breaking through Wei's aura pressure. With his current strength, even if a peak Heavenly Emperor martial artist wanted to suppress him with aura, it was also absolutely impossible. A mere 7th-level Heavenly Emperor wanted to use aura to suppress him. Truly laughable. Chapter 1193. Silver Spirit Blade. When the crowd saw the silver long sword in Jiwei's hand, it was sharp and extremely cold, and they couldn't help but exclaim. The Silver Spirit Blade was Jiwei's Yuan Ling sword. He didn't use it when he killed the gray-robed swordsman and attacked the fiery young man. Now that he was facing Nie Tian, he took out the Silver Spirit Blade, which showed that he had started to take Nie Tian seriously as an opponent. Silver Spirit Blade. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he stared at the silver long sword in Jiwei's hand. The sword body was surging with silver light, and the cold light was flickering, giving people an extremely heavy feeling of suffocation. It turns out that he has a Yuan Ling sword that is very suitable for the Silver Spirit Sword essence. No wonder his Silver Spirit Sword essence is more terrifying than Silver Lonely City. Nie Tian said in his heart, and at the same time his body began to surge with a terrifying sword essence. But in the eyes of others, he didn't move at all. Nie Tian activated the Ghost Kill Dark Star again. His sword intent merged with his star power, making him move in a completely stealthy manner. Little brat, go to hell. Jiwei's eyes were like poison, and the Silver Spirit Blade trembled in the air. Suddenly, a sharp sword essence whistled out, like a silver long snake, breaking through the air and attacking. The murderous aura filled the surrounding space, making people feel suffocated. Oh no! The crowd's heart trembled. The power of Jiwei's Silver Spirit Blade was inestimable. What was worse was that Nie Tian stood in the same place like a piece of wood, completely indifferent. Wasn't he waiting for death? Mr. Hanling was also quite frightened, and he screamed. However, just as the silver blade was about to reach Nie Tian, the Heaven Slash appeared in Nie Tian's hand, and he directly stabbed it out. Immediately, a boundless sword intent was released, and a black sword shadow appeared with a touch of blood, roaring as it flew out. Bang! At the moment when the two sword shadows collided, the void suddenly trembled, and a wave of air surged out in all directions. The people present couldn't bear this wave of air, and they all retreated. Crack, crack, crack. The limestone slabs on the ground were unable to withstand the impact of the surging sword intent, shattering into pieces. An enormous sword pit actually appeared. Kaboom! But right at this time, that black sword shadow erupted with a terrifying killing intent strangely. The silver blade immediately shattered. A feeling of death pounced wildly toward Jiwei. Jiwei's eyes trembled violently. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, but he reacted quickly. He stomped on the ground and retreated. Bang! However, he was still a step too late. A black blade struck him right in the shoulder, directly piercing through his shoulder. Immediately, blood gushed out. Seeing this scene, all the eyes opened wide, completely in disbelief. When the crowd saw this scene, all of their eyes opened wide, completely in disbelief. A fourth Firmament Heavenly Emperor swordsman defeating a seventh Firmament Heavenly Emperor swordsman with one sword. This was simply something impossible. Everyone looked at Tian. Tian. Nie Tian. Tian. Tian Tian. Nya. Only at this time did the people understand that Nie Tian making a move to save people was not seeking death, but that he possessed an extremely strange strength. When Nie Tian saw Jiwei getting injured, he shook his head helplessly. Clearly, the power of this sword did not satisfy him. The sword just now, not only did he use the Dark Star Ghostly Carnage, but that hint of blood colored in that sword shadow was precisely the taboo move, Weeping Blood Soul Cleaving. Under the fusion of two moves, furthermore, it was a sword that caught Jiwei by surprise. It actually only injured Jiwei and did not kill him. Nie Tian was somewhat disappointed. 7th level Heavenly Emperor martial artists are indeed still formidable. Nie Tian laughed bitterly in his heart, but his gaze swept across the sword Absolute Heaven Slash and saw a glaring crack. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash. A crack appeared on the sword body. The sword Absolute Heaven Slash was just a rank 7 spirit artifact. The power of that sword just now was too strong. The sword body was already unable to withstand the sword intense oppression. If Nie Tian used the sword Absolute Heaven Slash again, the the sword body might directly shatter, hard to repair. Hence, following this, Nietian was very unable to use the sword Absolute Heaven Slash anymore. This is impossible. At this time, Yin Jiwei's figure stopped. Although the wound on his shoulder was not fatal, it made him cut an extremely wretched figure. Furthermore, his combat strength also fell considerably. He did not dare to believe that a 4th-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist could actually erupt with such horrifying power. This virtually subverted his martial Dao understanding. "I'll kill you." At virtually the same time, that flame youth suddenly roared angrily. The Crimson Flame long sword attacked, stabbing a sword towards Yin Jiwei. A crimson flame, long snake appeared. Flames billowed in the air, courting death. Yin Jiwei just had nowhere to vent his belly full of rage. Seeing the flame youth make a move, the corners of his mouth curled into a hint of a cold smile. The silver soul blade stirred a bit in the air. A silver-colored sharp blade slashed out. "Be careful!" Nietian's gaze turned dark, and he cried out in shock. Meteor wings appeared on his back, his figure flying out like lightning. The silver soul blade brushed past Nietian's shoulder and flew past. He hugged the flame youth and barely avoided the fatal blow. The flame youth was young after all. He thought that he could make a move and kill Yin Jiwei after suffering a little injury. Fortunately, Nietian reacted in time. Otherwise, the flame youth would be dead for sure. Counting it, this was already the 2nd time Nietian saved his life. Amen. Yin Jiwei's move missed. His gaze turned dark, and he suddenly roared fiercely, "Stinking brat, I see how many people you can save." The moment his insolent voice faded, Yin Jiwei did not even look. Turning around, he slashed a sword towards the crowd. "Be careful!" Nietian's eyes suddenly dilated, and he actually saw this sword attack over towards Pu Fifan and Han Ling. He wanted to make a move to save them, but he was too far away and could not make it in time at all. "Junior apprentice brother, quickly go." Han Ling abruptly came to his senses. His figure did not retreat, but advanced, blocking in front of Pu Fifan. He was actually going to use his flesh and blood to block a fatal sword for Pu Fifan. "Senior apprentice brother." Pu Fifan suddenly reacted and screamed, his small face pale as paper. The crowd was also stunned for an instant. They did not expect that Yin Jiwei was so ruthless to actually directly attack others. The power of this sword of Yin Jiwei's was tremendous. As long as it landed, Han Ling and Pu Fifan would die tragically on the spot. "Who dares to touch my junior apprentice brother?" Just as Han Ling and Pu Fifan's life and death moment, a furious roar suddenly sounded out in the void. Following that, a streak of sword intent arrived from the sky, condensing into a sword shadow, and fell down from the sky. Bang! With a muffled sound, the two sword shadows collided together. Air billows spread out, directly blasting Han Ling and Pu Fifan flying out backward. But that sword shadow blocked most of the Silver Blade's attack. Han Ling and Pu Fifan only suffered light injuries and were not fatal. The next instant, a figure landed and asked nervously, "Junior apprentice brothers, are you guys all right?" Eldest senior brother. Han Ling and Pu Fifan looked at the person in front of them and was stunned, calling out a name at the same time. The person who saved their lives in the nick of time was none other than precisely their eldest senior brother, Lu Haoyu. A trace of blood hung at the corners of the current Lu Haoyu's mouth. Clearly, it was the injuries caused by forcefully receiving Yin Jiwei's sword. He only had 6th-level Heavenly Emperor strength. To be able to forcefully withstand Yin Jiwei's sword was already very not easy. Chapter 1194. Who is this person? Lu Haoyu's sudden appearance caused the crowd to be slightly stunned. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Anyone who could withstand Yin Jiwei's sword was definitely not a nobody. Someone who recognized Lu Haoyu and exclaimed, "He seems to be Lord Mo Qianjuan's disciple." So, he's Lord Mo Qianjuan's disciple. It's no wonder why he's able to stand against Yin Jiwei. The crowd thought as a peculiar glint shone in their eyes. It was clear that they were waiting to see a good show. Lu Haoyu? Jiwei glared at Lu Haoyu with killing intent in his eyes. First senior, he's very powerful. You must be careful, Han Ling reminded Lu Haoyu. Jiwei was definitely not an easy opponent to deal with. I know. Lu Haoyu nodded calmly as a smile crept up his lips. Even though he didn't say anything, his eyes showed that he had made up his mind. It was true that his actions in the past were wrong. However, from now on, he would shoulder the responsibility of a first senior. At the very least, he wouldn't allow anyone to harm his junior before him. Lu Haoyu, this matter has nothing to do with you. It's best if you don't interfere. Jiwei's voice suddenly sounded. He was advising Lu Haoyu not to interfere in this matter. Lu Haoyu's eyes flickered and he said coldly, Jiwei, from the moment you made a move to kill my junior brother, this matter is already related to me. The crowd was taken aback. They didn't expect Lu Haoyu to be so unyielding before Jiwei. On the other hand, Jiwei heaved a long sigh of relief, as if he had been frightened out of his wits. In truth, Jiwei should be grateful to Lu Haoyu for saving him. Otherwise, there was a good chance that he would have killed Han Ling and Pu Fifan. When Jiwei made his move earlier, he didn't think that Han Ling and Pu Fifan would be Mo Qianjuan's disciples. If Mo Qianjuan's disciple was killed in front of everyone, no matter how composed he was, there was no way he would let the matter rest. If that were to happen, Jiwei's life would be a small matter. Perhaps the entire Ascendant Cloudsword Pavilion would be in deep trouble. No matter how arrogant Jiwei was, he wouldn't dare to challenge the authority of a peak swordsman. Brother Lu, what happened just now was a moment of recklessness. I am willing to apologize. Then, something even more unexpected happened. Jiwei actually spoke softly in front of everyone and even said that he could apologize. The crowd's eyes flickered. Apparently, they didn't expect such a strange turn of events. His temperament is vicious enough, yet he can endure it. As expected, Jiwei is not an ordinary person. Tian thought to himself as he looked at Jiwei. Jiwei was not blindly arrogant. In front of certain people, he would still restrain himself a little. Of course, he wasn't afraid of Lu Haoyu, but Mo Qianjuan. Now that he knew that Lu Haoyu and the others were Mo Qianjuan's disciples, he didn't dare to kill them. If Tian had guessed correctly, Jiwei had already made up his mind to kill Lu Haoyu and the others when the sword Dao competition began. Brat, count yourself lucky this time. Jiwei threw a cold glance at Tian, threw a threatening sentence, and directly turned to leave. The fiery young man actually calmed down this time. He stood beside Tian, motionless, but his eyes were filled with terrible anger. Lu Haoyu didn't stop Jiwei from leaving. With his strength, he couldn't stop him. It was already good enough that he could save Han Ling and Pu Fifan. Tian looked at Jiwei's arrogant figure and couldn't help but shake his head slightly. The feeling of being threatened was indeed not a good one. At this time, the crowd also slowly dispersed and went to discuss the sword Dao competition. Lu Haoyu, have you thought it through? Tian walked up and smiled lightly. Thank you, Your Excellency. Lu Haoyu nodded slightly, then looked at Han Ling and Pu Fifan and said sincerely, My two junior brothers, I apologize for the way I handled things in the past. Big Senior, there's no need to stand on ceremony. We're all brothers, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. Han Ling smiled faintly. Han Ling, Jiwei is too powerful. I'm afraid that the matter between you and Miss Qin. Lu Haoyu suddenly thought of something and said worriedly, Big Senior, I'll deal with this matter personally. Han Ling nodded deeply. Jiwei is a ruthless and bloodthirsty person. I won't allow Qin Yu to marry him. His voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with determination. If Jiwei was an upright person, Han Ling might have given in. However, Jiwei was a ruthless person, and Han Ling couldn't bear to see his beloved woman jump into a pit of fire. In the eyes of the Qin clan, Qin Yu was just an object that they could make use of. The reason why they wanted her to marry Jiwei was because they wanted to use the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion to raise the prestige of the Sea of Swords. Seeing Han Ling's reaction, Tian couldn't help but smile. I really want to see what kind of woman Qin Yu is for Han Ling to be so infatuated with her. At this moment, the fiery young man silently walked up to the headless corpse and carried it in his arms. Without saying a word, he prepared to leave. Little brother, please wait a moment. Seeing that the other party was about to leave, Tian hurriedly called out, "Thank you for saving my life. I won't forget it. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely repay it," the fiery young man said. His figure didn't stop and continued to leave. Expo. At this moment, a gray-robed figure appeared in the air and landed beside the fiery young man. When he saw the corpse in the latter's arms, his expression immediately changed, and he bellowed furiously, "Who did it?" The furious bellow was like a clap of thunder. A violent aura burst forth, and the surrounding ground was forcefully torn apart. When Tian saw the newcomer, his gaze involuntarily narrowed. This person had a burly figure, and the muscles all over his body seemed to be bursting. He was as strong as a lion, and he actually had the strength of an 8th-level heavenly emperor. If this person had come a moment earlier, that gray-robed swordsman definitely wouldn't have died. "It's you." The gray-robed person was stunned for several seconds, then suddenly lifted his head. A pair of murderous pupils actually stared at Tian. Tian seemed to want to stop the fiery young man at this time. Hence, he was misunderstood by the gray-robed person. "Pay for my second brother's life." The gray-robed person immediately flew into a violent rage. A wild and tyrannical voice sounded out. Boundless essence energy surged wildly. An enormous lion directly appeared behind him. It was actually his Titan true body. When an 8th-level heavenly emperor martial artist Titan true body appeared, the surrounding space was immediately compressed until it taut. The ground cracked open inch by inch. A violent aura surged out. The crowd retreated 1,000 meters away one after another. Tian's brows furrowed. He did not expect that this person was so impulsive, directly using the Titan true body. "Fifth uncle." Right at this time, that fiery youth's figure moved, blocking in front of Tian, and said, "He didn't kill second uncle. It was someone else. He's my savior. If not for him, I'd also be killed by that person." Chapter 1195. Seeing that the aura of the gray-robed man had dissipated, Tian heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That person has already left." The gray-robed man glared at Tian and asked, "You know that man?" His eyes were burning with fury. "His name is Yue, the young master of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion," Tian said. Yue was Yin Guqing's son, so there was nothing wrong with calling him the young master. "That bastard," the gray-robed man roared through gritted teeth. "I don't care who he is. Since he killed my second brother, I'll make him pay with his blood." Seeing the gray-robed man's reaction, Tian narrowed his eyes. It seemed like the gray-robed man didn't know what kind of organization the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion was. "Fifth uncle, let's go." The fiery young man nodded to Tian and prepared to leave. The gray-robed man nodded. He didn't want to stay any longer, so he turned around and left. "Please wait a moment. I have something to ask the two of you." Tian took another step forward. He still didn't know the identity of the fiery young man. So how could he let him leave just like that? "What do you want?" The gray-robed man asked Tian. If not for the fact that Tian was the fiery young man's benefactor, he wouldn't have wasted his time. "My name is Tian. May I know how I should address the two of you?" Tian walked up to the two and introduced himself sincerely. "My name is Kong Shirbua, and he's my fifth uncle, Chun Feng." The fiery young man hesitated for a moment before replying. He didn't want to talk to others, but Tian had saved his life twice, so he couldn't turn him down. "Kong Shirbua, Chun Feng," Tian said as he glanced at the fiery young man and the gray-robed man. Chun Feng's face was dark, and it was clear that he was getting impatient. He said coldly, "What do you have to say? Just say it." Chun Feng might look like a burly man, but he was actually a meticulous person. He could tell that Tian had something to ask him. "Since that's the case, I won't beat around the bush." Tian nodded slightly. His gaze calmed down as he transmitted his voice to the two of them. I want to know, are the two of you from the Scarlet Flame Demon Palace? Of course, Nietian couldn't reveal the information about the Scarlet Flame Devil Palace in front of so many people. How did you know? Kong Shirbu's face changed, and he screamed, but he reacted quickly and swallowed the rest of his words. No. Chen Feng's face stiffened. Then, he replied in a cold tone. Nietian's eyes flickered slightly, capturing the two people's reactions perfectly. He immediately confirmed that these two people were from the Crimson Flame Devil Palace. However, Chen Feng clearly did not want to reveal his identity. Thus, he simply denied it. The Crimson Flame Demon Palace was destroyed more than 100 years ago. I didn't expect there to be people still alive. Perhaps Weimo too didn't die and just disappeared temporarily. Nietian thought to himself, as long as he could find the demonic road diagram, he might be able to investigate his past. Sir, are you all right? Chen Feng cast a peculiar glance at Nietian. Next, he pulled Kong Shirbu up and left. Wait. When Nietian saw that they were about to leave again, he called out again. Then, a crimson token appeared in his hand. It was the Crimson Flame token of the Crimson Flame Demon Palace. It flashed in front of Chen Feng and Kong Shirbu and disappeared. He said, I want to use this token to meet the palace master of the demonic road diagram. Why do you have? Chen Feng saw the token flash and was very sure that it was the Crimson Flame Demon Palace's Crimson Flame token. He was astonished and almost cried out. It seems that you are indeed from the Crimson Flame Demon Palace. Nietian smiled faintly and transmitted his voice. Chen Feng's eyes darkened, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He said coldly, What do you want? Don't be nervous. I'm not an enemy. I just want to find the palace master of the demonic road diagram and ask him about some things. Nietian nodded slightly. Although he and the Crimson Flame Demon Palace were incompatible like fire and water more than 100 years ago, he had let go of everything now. Thinking back, the Crimson Flame Demon Palace didn't do anything bad back then. They just inexplicably invaded the day-night celestial realm, which was why they had a conflict with Nietian. The palace master won't see you. Even if you have the Crimson Flame token, it's useless. Chen Feng said cold. Then, without delay, he pulled Kong Shirbu and left. Nietian didn't stop him. If the other party didn't want to say, he couldn't force him. Moreover, he already knew an important piece of information. The demonic road diagram was still alive. Chen Feng and Kong Shirbu would probably participate in the Sword Principle competition. There would be opportunities to meet in the future, so Nietian wasn't in a hurry. Since Chen Feng already knew that Yin Jiwei killed his second brother, of course he wouldn't let the latter go. Mister, are these two people from the Crimson Flame Demon Palace? At this time, Han Ling walked up and asked nervously in a low voice. Of course he knew about the Crimson Flame token. He was the one who handed the token to Nietian. Yes. Nietian nodded and didn't say much. No matter what, he had to find out his background. He faintly felt that his death back then might have something to do with his background. At this time, Lu Haoyu walked over and asked, Han Ling, do you want to participate in the Sword Principle competition? Yes. Han Ling nodded and said, since we're already in Tianhuang City, we must participate in the Sword Principle competition even if there's danger. For all swordsmen, the Sword Principle competition didn't just mean danger, it also meant opportunity. As long as they could enter the top 100, they could enter the ancient sword tomb. This was a temptation that no swordsman could resist. Therefore, even with the threat of a swordsman like Yin Jiwei, the enthusiasm of all the swordsmen to sign up didn't decrease. Senior brother, I want to participate too. Pu Fifan raised his head and said with a determined look. Junior brother, the Sword Principle competition isn't child's play. You're still young, so it's better if you don't participate, Han Ling said with a frown. The Sword Principle competition was a gamble between swordsmen. Pu Fifan was too young and too weak. Han Ling couldn't even protect himself, so how could he protect him? Junior brother, your talent in Sword Principle is the best among all the brothers. You don't need to participate in this Sword Principle competition. Lu Haoyu also said in a deep voice, with Pu Fifan's talent, even if he didn't enter the ancient sword tomb, As long as he continued to grow, he would have the chance to become a peak swordsman like Mo Qianjun in the future. I must participate. Pu Fifan was very persistent and had a determined look on his face. Lu Haoyu and Han Ling looked at each other helplessly. Let him participate. At this time, Niet Tian smiled faintly and said, I'll protect his safety. Mister, I'm afraid that's not appropriate, right? Han Ling was slightly stunned. He believed in Niet Tian's strength, but this would undoubtedly add more danger to the sword principle competition. Don't worry. Niet Tian nodded and smiled. But in his heart, he thought, it's safer for Pu Fifan to participate in the sword principle competition. If he's left alone in Tianhuang City, it'll be the most dangerous. Yin Jiwei must have already known about Pu Fifan's extraordinary talent and would never allow such a genius to continue living. Therefore, Niet Tian could only be at ease with Pu Fifan by his side. If that's the case, let's go and sign up. Han Ling didn't know what Niet Tian was thinking, but he believed in the latter's decision. Niet Tian and the others arrived at the place where the sword principle competition would sign up. They immediately saw a man and a woman walking over. They were actually acquaintances, Xiao Yun and Shangwan Yufei. Chapter 1196. Brother Nye. Xiao Yun greeted enthusiastically when he saw Niet Tian and the others, but the black-clad old man behind him locked his gaze on Niet Tian. His eyes flickered as though he had discovered something. It's Shangwan Feiyu. Niet Tian's eyes flickered when he saw the black-clad old man, but he immediately regained his composure. However, he was rather surprised. He was very familiar with the black-clad old man in front of him. His name was Shangwan Feiyu, the younger brother of the Abyss Master of the Abyss of Still Water, Shangwan Feihong. In Niet Tian's previous life, he was extremely famous for his sword principle, which attracted countless challengers. Shangwan Feiyu was one of the many challengers, but he lost miserably to Niet Tian. Niet Tian still remembered that Shangwan Feiyu's sword intent of still water was very terrifying. If not for his sword principle realm being much higher than his opponent, the outcome of that battle would be unknown. After that battle, Shangwan Feiyu was completely convinced by Niet Tian and even had the urge to take him as his master. However, Niet Tian was a swordsman of the same generation as him. In the end, they only talked about swords as friends and could be considered as good friends in the sword principle. Niet Tian did not expect to meet Shangwan Feiyu on such an occasion. Shangwan Feiyu is only over 200 years old. Why does he look so old? Niet Tian could not help but frown when he saw Shangwan Feiyu's aged appearance. He was puzzled. Shangwan Feiyu was already at the 8th level of the Heavenly Emperor realm. To him, 200 years old was at most the prime of his life. He should not look so old. Even though Long Out Yin was oppressed by the Yin Corpse Curse Seal and looked slightly old, he looked much younger after the Yin Corpse Curse Seal was absorbed by the 8 Desolate Ghost Bone. What's wrong with Shangwan Feiyu? Why does he look old? Niet Tian was puzzled, but he did not show it. Xiao Yun, is this young master your friend? Shangwan Feiyu sensed a very familiar sword intent aura from Niet Tian, but he was not sure, so he asked Xiao Yun with a faint smile. Second uncle, his name is Niet Tian. He's a close friend of mine. Xiao Yun stood beside Niet Tian and said excitedly, as if they were very familiar with each other. Niet Tian. Upon hearing this name, Shangwan Feiyu could not help but frown. He thought to himself, this silver-haired guy is also called Niet Tian, and he has a sword essence aura that is very similar to Mr. Nye's. Could he be related to Mr. Nye? Thinking of this, Shangwan Feiyu looked up and down at Niet Tian. He laughed and said, Young Master Nye, you are so young, but you have such strength. Your teacher must be a great swordsman. Could you introduce him to I? Niet Tian was stunned for a moment, but he immediately understood that Shangwan Feiyu must have regarded him as another Niet Tian's disciple or descendant. My teacher is not willing to associate with outsiders. Please forgive him. Since this was the case, Niet Tian made the best of it. He bowed slightly and said. Upon hearing Niet Tian's words, Shangwan Feiyu's eyes suddenly trembled. He exclaimed in his heart, Is Mr. Nye really still alive? Second uncle, are you okay? Xiao Yin was stunned when he saw Shangwan Feiyu's reaction. He asked curiously, I'm fine. Shangwan Feiyu reacted and shook his head slightly. His eyes were fixed on Ye Tian, and he looked extremely strange. Second uncle, isn't his hair a little strange? Do you have to stare at him like that? Shangwan Yufei pouted and said angrily. She then introduced herself. Han Ling and the others also introduced themselves. Han Ling, Miss Shangwan and Mr. Xiao are from the Stillwater Abyss? Lu Haoyu was surprised. He did not expect to meet a swordsman from the Stillwater Abyss. The swordsman from the Stillwater Abyss has not appeared for a long time. This time, the ancient sword tomb is open, so we are also here to join the fun. Shangwan Feiyu laughed dryly and said lightly. Lu Haoyu was surprised and could not react for a long time. Next, Nye Tian and the others signed up one by one and received a spiritual talisman. This spiritual talisman was not only the basis for a swordsman to participate in the sword principle competition, but it was also a life-saving item for a swordsman. As long as the spiritual talisman was crushed, it meant that one had automatically given up on the sword principle competition. In principle, no one would kill one. However, this was only in principle. If one encountered a homicidal maniac like Yin Zhuwei, he would kill one regardless of whether the spiritual talisman was broken or not. This is a sensory spiritual talisman. It should correspond to a sensory spiritual formation. All swordsmen will appear on the sensory spiritual formation after entering the forbidden zone of infinite region. Nye Tian looked at the spiritual talisman in his hand and said lightly in his heart, if a swordsman entered the forbidden zone of infinite region with the spiritual talisman, he would know the whereabouts of all swordsmen at any time. At the thought of his whereabouts being exposed to others, Nye Tian had an uneasy feeling. Mr. Nye, the sword principle competition will begin in half a month. I hope that you can team up with Yufei and Xiao Yun to pass the competition. Shangwan Feiyu walked over and deliberately got close to Nye Tian. He seemed to want to confirm the sword essence aura of the latter. He stared at Nye Tian with a cunning look on his face. Shangwan Feiyu was a swordsman of the older generation. Of course, he would not participate in the sword principle competition. With his age and sword principle strength, even if he could enter the sword tomb, it would be difficult for him to inherit the sword principle inheritance. If he competed with young swordsmen for a place in the sword principle competition, he would only be a joke. The sword principle competition was so cruel that the participating swordsmen would definitely team up. The most obvious way was to team up according to their sections. Lu Haoyu and Han Ling were slightly stunned. They did not expect Shangwan Feiyu to take the initiative to team up. Lu Haoyu and Nye Tian's strength was not bad, but Han Ling and Pu Fifan were too weak. Was he not afraid that they would be a burden if they teamed up with these four people? Second uncle, Shangwan Yufei, also looked unhappy. Her arrogant eyes swept across Han Ling and Pu Fifan. Han Ling was fine, at least he could protect himself. However, Pu Fifan was just a child. The sword principle competition was a gamble of life and death. Who would have the mood to take care of a child? Second uncle's suggestion is great. Brother Nye, let's team up. Xiao Yun was very willing and looked very excited. Since Mr. Shangwan is so kind, how can I refuse? Nye Tian smiled faintly. Of course, he knew what Shangwan Feiyu was thinking. Shangwan Feiyu smiled faintly and stared at Nye Tian with his pair of cunning eyes. He thought to himself, since you are related to Mr. Nye, how can you be weak? If Yufei and Xiao Yun can team up with you, we will have full confidence in this sword principle competition. At that moment, Shangwan Feiyu had already determined that the silver-haired swordsman in front of him was definitely related to the god of war, Nye Tian. Although he was not sure what the specific relationship was, he believed that with the god of war, Nye Tian's strength, the silver-haired swordsman's strength, must be extremely terrifying. The sword principle competition would only begin in half a month. Nye Tian and the others were prepared to leave first. Teacher, it's this person. Just as they were about to leave, a deep and angry roar was heard. Ah! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He felt that the voice was somewhat familiar. He turned around and saw that it was indeed a familiar person, Xue Xuanqing. Xue Xuanqing stared at Nie Tian calmly. Beside him stood the woman who had attempted to have an affair with him. Chapter 1197. Here comes another smelly rat. Nie Tian's gaze swept across Xue Xuanqing with a helpless look. Then he looked at that green-clothed old man. Very clearly, the green-clothed old man was the main character looking for trouble this time. What's the matter? Nie Tian looked at Xue Xuanqing and asked coldly. Previously, he did not kill Xue Xuanqing on account of Hidden Sword Valley's Valley Master Ling Zhan. He did not expect that the other party still dared to take the initiative to provoke. Xue Xuanqing did not answer Nie Tian's question, but said to the green-clothed old man beside him, "Teacher, it's this brat who insulted Hidden Sword Valley's swordsman and insulted Valley Master." Nie Tian's gaze turned intense slightly. Xue Xuanqing really did not blush at all when lying, spewing shit in front of Nie Tian. "Brat, your guts are really not small. Could it be that my Hidden Sword Valley is really so easy to provoke?" The green-clothed old man spoke coldly, his eyes surging with deep anger. "What do you want?" Nie Tian swept his divine sense across the green-clothed old man and said coolly. The green-clothed old man's strength was not weak. He was actually a 7th-level heavenly emperor. Furthermore, he had the realm of middle-rank sword profound meaning. Although this strength was very strong, placed on a 300 to 400 years old man, it was also just sloppy and ordinary. One had to know, Yinjiwei was also a 7th-level heavenly emperor, and his sword Dao realm had already reached high-rank sword profound meaning. It was no exaggeration to say that Yinjiwei could insta-kill the green-clothed old man in front of him with one sword. Although the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion and Hidden Sword Valley were both part of the 9 greatsword sects, their strength was quite different. Among the 9 greatsword sects, they could basically be divided into 3 levels: upper 3 sects, middle 3 sects, and lower 3 sections. Heaven Desolate Hall, Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, Still Water Abyss were the upper 3 sects, while Hidden Sword Valley, Sword Viewing Sea, and so on were the lower 3 sections. If Nie Tian did not remember wrongly, Hidden Sword Valley was a bottom-tier existence among the 9 greatsword sects. Nie Tian did not explain anything to the green-clothed old man because he knew that even if he explained, the other party would not believe it either. "Brat, you're really arrogant. How dare you speak in such a manner in front of I?" The cyan-clothed old man smiled coldly, and the sword intent around him began to surge, as if it would turn into a terrible killing intent in the next moment. "Is your status very high?" Nie Tianling sneered, not giving him any face at all. He said, "You're already so old, and you've only just broken through to the intermediate sword ultimacy. To think that you still dare to come out and embarrass yourself. If I were you, I would have killed myself long ago." Since the other party had taken the initiative to provoke him, there was no need for Nie Tian to show mercy. "Brat, you're courting death." The azure-robed old man was instantly enraged. The aura around his body swelled, and a terrifying golden lightning sword intent radiated from his body. Lightning bolts hundreds of meters long were released, surging in the air as if they were going to tear space apart. At this moment, Xiao Yun was about to attack, but he was stopped by Shangguan Feiyu. Shangguan Feiyu looked at Nie Tian expectantly. He really wanted to see the strength of the Battle Immortal's disciple. Lightning attribute sword intent. When Nie Tian saw the surging sword intent around the azure-robed old man, he could not help but smile in surprise. Originally, he was still thinking about how to defeat the azure-robed old man with one sword strike. Now, it seemed that he would not need to use the Dark Star Ghost Kill. Nie Tian's Thunderbolt Divine Pattern, which was integrated into the sword intent, had an absolute suppression on all lightning attribute powers, especially the lightning attribute sword intent. Before his Thunderbolt sword intent, the opponent would not even be able to raise their heads. "Brat, how dare you offend me? You're dead meat." Xue Xuanqing's figure retreated 1,000 meters away. He stared at Nie Tian with a pair of vicious eyes as he spoke in a cold voice. He believed that if his teacher personally attacked, he would definitely be able to kill Nietian with one sword strike. The others also retreated, not daring to get close. Shangwan Feiyu's eyes were tense. Although he was confident in Nietian, he was also prepared to attack if there were any accidents. "Brat, go to hell." The cyan-robed old man let out a furious roar as sword intent madly surged out of his body and pounced towards Nietian like raging waves. At the same time, a huge golden lightning sword appeared, flickering with lightning power as it slashed towards Nietian. "It's over. The silver-hair brat is dead meat." When the crowd saw this, their hearts jumped to their throats. They all believed that Nietian was dead meat. Nietian stood where he was. His body moved, and a thunderbolt sea appeared behind him. He did not even use his sword. Instead, he punched out. The thunderbolt sea suddenly roared and tumbled. A thunderbolt dragon appeared and tumbled in the air. A terrifying dragon aura surged in the space. The thunderbolt dragon pounced ferociously. The dragon's body was flowing with golden dragon energy. At the same time, a terrifying sword intent surged. Kaboom! In midair, the golden thunder giant sword collided with the thunderbolt dragon. After a crisp sound, the golden thunder giant sword shattered. It could not resist the thunderbolt dragon at all. What a horrifying power suppression! When Shangwan Feiyu saw this scene, his gaze suddenly trembled. He could naturally tell that Nietian's power of thunder had an absolute suppression on the azure-robed old man's golden thunder sword intent. At the same time, that surging dragon energy was also incomparably terrifying. Arg! The next instant, a shrill scream sounded out. The azure-robed old man directly flew out backward, smashing heavily onto the ground. The limestone floor shattered inch by inch. His entire person became a bloody mess. The scene that suddenly happened made the entire place fall into a deathly silence. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Nietian with dumbfounded faces, completely unable to believe the scene before their eyes. A 7th-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist was sent flying by a 4th-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist with one punch. How is this possible? Shangwan Yufei, Xiao Yun, and the rest were stunned, their faces blank. Xiao Yun reckoned that his still water sword intent could also receive the azure-robed old man's sword. But wanting to seriously injure the azure-robed old man, that was absolutely impossible. Only at this time did Shangwan Yufei know that this silver-haired youth's strength was actually strange and horrifying like this. While Lu Haoyu was even more astonished to the extreme. Thinking about how he was once defeated by Nietian with one sword, it turned out that it was not a coincidence. "Teacher." After a long time, Xue Xuanqing finally reacted. With a wail, he pounced over toward the azure-robed old man. The azure-robed old man struggled to stand up, dripping with blood all over his body. His eyes, when looking at Nietian, carried thick apprehension as he said in a trembling voice, How could this be?" He could not understand that he, an exalted 7th-level Heavenly Emperor strength, would actually lose to a 4th-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Furthermore, he was defeated so miserably, virtually without the slightest strength to retaliate. "You guys leave. Consider it giving Ling Zhan face this time." Nietian laughed and said coldly. Looking on the account of a tiny bit of face between him and the Concealed Sword Valley's Valley Master, Ling Zhan, Nietian did not kill the azure-robed old man. If he fully released the dragon chi within his body just now, one punch would be sufficient to insta-kill the azure-robed old man. "You?" The azure-robed old man's gaze darkened. Before he finished a sentence, he directly vomited a mouthful of fresh blood. "I've never insulted the Concealed Sword Valley swordsman, let alone insulted Valley Master Ling Zhan. I'll have to trouble you to ask clearly next time before finding trouble with me. This disciple of yours is lusting after women and doesn't think about improving himself. Discipline him properly." Nietian gave the azure-robed old man a glance, thought for a while, and still said, "Xue Xuanqing, what's going on here?" The azure-robed old man roared angrily, a pair of pupils staring at Xue Shuangqing, practically spewing fire. Chapter 1198. Teacher. Xue Shuangqing's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. His eyes flickered intensely, and his body was drenched in cold sweat. Let's go. Nie Tian was not in the mood to pay attention to this pair of master and disciple. He said nonchalantly, and then bade farewell to Shangwan Feiyu and the rest before leaving. The crowd looked in the direction where Nie Tian disappeared with shocked expressions and could not speak for a long time. Second uncle. How can his strength be so terrifying? Shangwan Yufei looked at the silver-haired back view and said with a surprised face. Shangwan Feiyu laughed bitterly and seemed to have thought of something. He shook his head and said, because he has a terrifying person behind him. Following that, Shangwan Feiyu and the rest also left, and the crowd quickly dispersed. Scoundrel, let's go. The old man in green roared angrily and turned to leave. It was unknown how he would deal with Xue Shuangqing. After Nie Tian and the rest left, they found a remote inn and prepared to spend the next half a month in the inn. Apart from Nie Tian, Lu Haoyu, Han Ling, and Pu Fifan, the other swordsmen from the Limitless Mountain did not participate in the sword doctrine competition. Lu Haoyu told them to go back and inform Mo Qianjun of the situation here. Perhaps after Mo Qianjun knew, he might come personally. After all, Han Ling and Qin Yang had a life-and-death duel. Han Ling, let me take a look at your spirit talismans. Nie Tian entered the room and asked Han Ling and the rest to hand the spirit talismans to him. Nie Tian held 4 spirit talismans in his hand and probed them with his divine senses. He carefully compared and felt the 4 spirit talismans. After confirming that there was no difference between the 4 spirit talismans, his face relaxed a lot. Then, he returned the spirit talismans to the 3. He was worried that someone had tampered with the spirit talismans and used them to track him. Now, all the spirit talismans were the same. There were countless of them in the entire Tianwang city. Hence, there was no way to track him using the spirit talismans. Following that, the other 3 returned to their own rooms. There were still 4 months before the start of the sword doctrine competition. All the swordsmen participating in the competition would cultivate hard and strive to improve their strength. Half a month's time is sufficient for me to break through to the 5th level of Heavenly Emperor. In the room, Nie Tian murmured. He was currently a peak 4th level Heavenly Emperor, and there were still remnants of energy absorbed from the spiritual pool of heaven and earth in his body. Moreover, the sovereign dual meridians were also fusing more thoroughly. Half a month later, he was confident that his strength would rise to the 5th level Heavenly Emperor. Nie Tian sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. Within the primal chaos original coffin, the 9 extreme chaos beast had already fully recovered. It was in peak condition. Its furry body was curled up as it slept soundly. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. In the room, Nie Tian was in a state of cultivation. Dense heaven and earth spiritual energy surged around him, causing the space around him to become restless. This was the sign of a breakthrough. Nie Tian's brows furrowed tightly. Waves of berserk spiritual energy impacted his 9 essence meridians, making his body tremble along with it. Nie Tian originally thought that half a month's time was sufficient to let him easily break through to the 5th level Heavenly Emperor. But he did not expect that after the dual meridians in his body fused, the demand for heaven and earth spiritual energy became even greater, making his breakthrough require even more heaven and earth spiritual energy, imperceptibly increasing the difficulty of breaking through. This way, each time Nie Tian broke through, his strength would increase substantially. Break for me. At this time, Nie Tian roared angrily. A wild aura around him finally broke through the shackles, gushing out wildly. He directly stood up, his gaze flickering with a sharp light, his entire person as sharp as a sword. 5th level Heavenly Emperor finally broke through. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a hint of a smile. Wiping away the sweat beads on his forehead, he said with a faint smile. Finally, he broke through to the 5th level Heavenly Emperor. The fifth-level Heavenly Emperor was a watershed in the Heavenly Emperor realm. Many people found it hard to break through. Nietion only used several months' time to go from the fourth-level Heavenly Emperor to the fifth-level Heavenly Emperor. Such a horrifying advancement speed was inconceivable. Quickly come and take a look. What's the fifth move of the Starry Sky, ancient martial art? Nietion could not hide the agitation in his heart. Divine sense moved, directly entering the Starry River's boundary. The dazzling fourth level, celestial river. The power of stars awakened by half. Starlight flickered, exuberant with vitality. Amen. Nietion's heart stirred, wanted to flip to the next page of the Starry Sky, ancient martial art. He actually discovered that the Starry Sky, ancient martial art did not have any reaction at all, making him involuntarily frown. What's going on? Nietion had a puzzled look. Previously, each time his strength increased once, the Starry Sky, ancient martial art would be able to flip to the next page, letting him learn the next move. But now it actually could not be opened. Nietion tried a few more times, but there was still no activity. So strange. Nietion had a depressed look, not knowing what was going on. Forget it. After trying for a long time to no avail, Nietion finally gave up. He felt that perhaps when his strength continued to improve, he would be able to open the Starry Sky, ancient martial art. With a thought, Nietion prepared to leave the Starry River. However, at that very moment, he suddenly discovered something strange. The divine patterns in his divine sense had become violent. Countless magical symbols joined together and gradually formed a huge magical symbol net. Although it was somewhat similar to the heaven-shrouding totem, it was formless and shadowless, which made it very strange. This is some kind of array. Nietion was stunned at first, then immediately reacted, carefully perceiving the aura of the holographic divine runes, his face revealing a happy smile. The power of this array is so strong. It can actually imprison the five senses and even the essence force of a martial artist. Nietion immediately sensed that the array formed by the holographic divine runes released a powerful imprisonment force that could imprison the five senses of a martial artist, and even had a certain suppression force on the Yuan Meridian. Holographic imprisonment. The next moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Nietion's mind, making him stunned. Holographic imprisonment. Nietion was very excited. He had heard from a sword elder that when the holographic divine runes were cultivated to the extreme, it could perceive the world and contain everything, but he did not expect that the holographic divine runes could also create a terrible imprisonment. Although he had not used it yet, Nietion could perceive that the power of the holographic imprisonment was very terrifying. It seemed to be more terrifying than the suppression caused by the sky shrouding totem. Imagine if it was a battle of life and death. The other party's five senses and Yuan Meridian were imprisoned. It would definitely be fatal. Very good. Nietion was very excited. With the holographic imprisonment, he had an extremely terrifying trump card. Now the only regret was that there was a crack on the sword extinction heaven slash, and he could no longer use it. There must be many ancient swords in the ancient sword tomb. If I find one that matches the attribute of the sword extinction heaven slash, I can ask Tiangong to refine it again. I will definitely be able to make the sword extinction heaven/emperor light reappear. Nietion murmured, "Sir." At this time, Hanling's voice sounded outside the door. Nietion suddenly remembered that today was the day of the sword competition. At this time, Nietion suddenly sensed two familiar auras, causing his eyes to freeze, and he said in surprise, "It's them." Nietion smiled faintly, walked out of the room, and said to Han Ling, "We have guests." Guests? Han Ling was slightly stunned. He did not know what Nietion meant. Nietion had a strange smile on the corner of his mouth, but he did not say anything. Chapter 1199. It's them. Han Ling's eyes flickered when he saw Chen Feng and Kong Shibua. He knew that they were from the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace, but he didn't know why they were here. "Young Master Nya." Chen Feng looked at Nietion and said in a deep voice. It was obvious that they were here for Nietion. Nietion smiled faintly in response, but in his heart he felt strange. How did they find him? Then that Nyetian and the others were staying in was very remote. Very few people could find it. It was definitely not a coincidence that Chun Feng and the others were here. Young Master Nya, I have something to talk to you about, Chun Feng said directly. Okay, let's talk in the room. Nye Tian smiled and entered the room, indicating Han Ling and the others to guard outside. There were only Nye Tian and Chun Feng in the room. Palace Lord asked me to find you. Chun Feng sat down, but his eyes were fixed on Nye Tian. He seemed very strange. After meeting Nye Tian that day, Chun Feng had returned to the demonic Crimson Flames Palace and informed the Palace Lord of the demonic Crimson Flames Palace, Lu Moltu, that Nye Tian possessed a Scarlet Flame token. Due to that, Lu Moltu appeared very anxious. Thus, he asked Chun Feng to find Nye Tian. Nye Tian's location was what Lu Moltu had told Chun Feng. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He didn't show it on his face, but he was very excited in his heart. He had already guessed that it was very likely that his Crimson Flame token had exposed his whereabouts. Lu Moltu could sense his presence through the Crimson Flame token. Since it was Lu Moltu who had asked Chun Feng to come here, things were getting interesting. Did Lord Moltu agree to see me? Nye Tian asked with a smile. Lu Moltu most likely knew about Nye Tian's background, and the latter was eager to meet him. Chun Feng was stunned. He didn't expect Nye Tian to be so smart. He calmed down and said, Palace Lord said that he wants to make a deal with you. A deal? Nye Tian was slightly taken aback. Then he showed great interest and said, Tell me about it. Chun Feng nodded and said, Palace Master said that he hopes that you can protect the young master during the Sword Dao competition. Furthermore, you must help the young master obtain the Sword Dao inheritance after entering the ancient sword tomb. If you can do this, the Palace Lord will meet with you. Young master? Nye Tian was taken aback. Next, he turned to look outside the room and understood. The young Lord Chun Feng was referring to as Kong Shibua. It seemed like Kong Shibua's identity was not ordinary. Even the demonic Lu had to respectfully refer to him as young master. Yes, Chun Feng nodded solemnly, confirming that the young master he mentioned was Kong Shibua. He then asked directly, Are you willing to make such a deal? Nye Tian smiled strangely. He did not reply directly and instead suddenly asked, Does Lord Lu Mo to know who I am? It was not difficult for Nye Tian to protect Kong Shibua during the Sword Dao competition. However, it was not easy to ensure that Kong Shibua could obtain the Sword Dao inheritance in the ancient sword tomb. This was because the Sword Dao inheritance not only required strength, but also opportunity. It would not be good to forcefully fuse with a Sword Dao inheritance of an incompatible attribute. Nye Tian could not determine whether there was a Sword Dao inheritance suitable for Kong Shibua in the ancient sword tomb. The sect master said that your name is Nye Tian. He knows who you are, and he also knows why you want to see him. To Nye Tian's surprise, Chun Feng seemed to have anticipated Nye Tian's question, and thus answered calmly. If you can help the young master obtain the legacy of Sword Dao, the sect master will tell you what you want to know. Nye Tian frowned slightly, and his expression became strange. For what Chun Feng said, it seemed that the demonic Lu already knew his true identity. But how is this possible? The news of Nye Tian's death was known throughout the Heaven Realm, and the demonic Lu seemed to know that he was still alive and was very certain of it. Could it be that the demonic Lu really knows about my identity? The doubts in Nye Tian's heart intensified. He decided that no matter what, he had to see the demonic Lu. All right, I agree to this deal. I hope that Lord Demonic Lu will not go back on his word, Nye Tian said in a deep and stern voice. Chun Feng nodded slightly and said, Don't worry, the Palace Lord is not a despicable person who goes back on his word. After the two sides made the deal, Nye Tian stood up and walked out of the room, preparing to leave this place. Today was the day the Sword Dao competition would begin. It was likely that all the swordsmen had already gathered in the square. Nye Tian and the others did not delay and directly went to the square where they had signed up. At this time, the square was filled with a sea of people. There were tens of thousands of swordsmen gathered together. There are so many people participating in the Sword Dao competition. Han Ling's eyes darkened when he saw the scene before him. It seemed that the sword principle battle was more intense than he had expected. Tens of thousands of cultivators had entered, but only 100 remained. This elimination rate was really terrifying. So many swordsmen. Can a small forbidden realm of infinite wasteland hold them all? Tian smiled bitterly. He had never been to the forbidden realm of infinite wasteland and even suspected that the forbidden realm was not big enough to hold so many swordsmen. There was no doubt that the competition in the Sword Dao this time would definitely be an extremely horrifying and fierce battle between dragons and tigers. There are at least 30 to 40,000 swordsmen here. Are they all going to enter the forbidden realm of infinite wasteland together? Lu Haoyu frowned and said with a puzzled expression, "Of course not. Just look at the sky and you will know." At this time, an excited voice sounded. Then, 3 figures appeared. It was Xiao Yun and the others. Tian smiled faintly. He had just been looking for Xiao Yun and the others. He did not expect them to appear so quickly. It's the iron-backed dragon eagle. Everyone raised their heads to look at the sky. More than 10 huge figures appeared, covering the sky and darkening the entire space. So they are using the iron-backed dragon eagle to transport the swordsmen to the forbidden realm of infinite wasteland. Tian smiled faintly. More than 10 iron-backed dragon eagles were enough to transport tens of thousands of swordsmen. Everyone, please board the iron-backed dragon eagle. At this time, a mighty voice resounded in the square. It contained an extremely powerful force, and everyone could hear it clearly. "I'll go first." As the mighty voice fell, the entire square boiled. Countless people fought to be the first to shout and soared into the sky, flying onto the iron-backed dragon eagle. Countless sword essences surged in midair, and the entire sky was filled with sword essences. They clashed with each other and exploded with terrifying airwaves. "Are you in such a hurry to die?" Xiao Yun chuckled when he saw the scene. The corner of Tian's mouth twitched. He was not in a hurry. The first to enter the forbidden realm of infinite wasteland meant that they would be the first to enter the danger zone. These people risked their lives to go to a dangerous place, which made people speechless. In just a moment, all the swordsmen in the square had basically boarded the iron-backed dragon eagle, leaving only a few dozen swordsmen who were not in a hurry. "Let's go up too." With a faint smile, Tian soared into the sky and released a fierce sword aura, which was overbearing and sharp. The others followed Tian and boarded the iron-backed dragon eagle almost at the same time. Shangguan Feiyu, Chun Feng, and the others looked at the iron-backed dragon eagle above their heads. Their eyes flickered with anticipation. At the same time, in the Infinite Wasteland Hall in the center of Infinite Wasteland City, a few figures stood in the hall and stared at the sensing spiritual formation in the center of the hall. In the spiritual formation, countless light spots flickered and floated in midair. Chapter 1200. The sensory spiritual array at the center of the Heaven Wasteland Great Hall surged with runes, and the power of the array flowed endlessly. This was a very mysterious sensory spiritual array that could sense the aura of every talisman. Every light that represented a swordsman participating in the sword principle competition. Senior brother is indeed powerful. A small sword principle competition has attracted so many swordsmen. Beside the spiritual array, a skinny figure appeared. He spoke coldly with a strange smile on his face. The person who spoke was a gray-robed swordsman who looked to be in his 40s or 50s. He was as skinny as a mummy, and his aura was restrained. His eyes were as empty as the abyss, but they gave off an extremely terrifying, suffocating pressure, as if one look at him would sink into the abyss. This person was none other than one of the 5 great swordsmen of the Heaven Domain, Duguin-I. Duguin-I was a swordsman from the Heaven Wasteland Hall, and was also the Deputy Hall Master of the Heaven Wasteland Hall. It was not strange for him to appear here. Opposite Duguin-I stood a middle-aged man with a long beard. He was dressed in white and looked elegant and handsome, giving off a gentlemanly feeling. However, his eyes flickered with a cold light, as if there was a deep secret hidden in them. He was Dugu Ni's senior brother, the Hall Master of the Heaven Wasteland Hall, Songshan Xue. These swordsmen are all here for the ancient sword tomb. Otherwise, they would not participate in the sword principle competition. Song Shanshua said indifferently. His expression was calm, and there was not the slightest ripple in his eyes. Yes. Dugu and I let out a strange laugh. He looked at the light dots in the sensory spiritual array and said, "Everyone comes for benefits. In order to get what they want, they do not hesitate to gamble with their lives. I wonder how many of these light dots will flicker after the sword principle competition." Dugani's eyes were as calm as water, as if the light dots were not people, but ants. "Hall Master, all the swordsmen have arrived above the forbidden region of Heaven Wasteland. Should we let them in now?" At this time, a gray-robed elder spoke respectfully. From his attire, he should be a spiritual array master. "Okay, let them in." Song Shanshua nodded slightly, a strange smile flashing across his lips. "Go in, all of you go in. The show is about to begin." Dugu and I chuckled with excitement in his eyes. At the same time, in a forbidden zone of the desolate mountain range, more than a dozen steelback dragon eagles floated in the air. Tens of thousands of swordsmen stood on them, looking down at the forbidden zone with excitement and uneasiness. What a powerful sword formation! Nyetian stood on the back of a steelback dragon eagle. His eyes trembled involuntarily when he sensed the vast power of the formation coming from below. He did not expect the forbidden region of infinite wasteland to be guarded by a huge sword formation. This isn't an ancient forbidden spell. It seems to have existed for only 100 years. The power of this spell is very strong. Nyetian thought to himself, after which he looked at the talisman in his hand. The aura within the talisman was similar to the power of the formation. It contained the power of the sword formation. You can enter the forbidden zone now. The talismans in your hands can temporarily open the forbidden zone's protective sword array. At this moment, a swordsman from the desolate palace appeared and said coldly, "After entering the forbidden zone, if the talisman in your hand breaks, you will be eliminated. Someone in the forbidden zone will take you away. Remember, there will only be 100 swordsmen left in the forbidden zone." The man emphasized the last sentence as if to remind everyone to grab the talismans from others and break them. "All right, I'll go in first." As soon as the man finished his sentence, someone could not wait any longer and directly leaped down from the steelback dragon eagle. When he was close to the sword formation, the talisman in his hand released the power of the formation, which tore a crack in the sword formation. The figure entered the crack and instantly disappeared. Upon seeing this, the other swordsmen also leaped down from the steelback dragon eagles. Countless figures tore a crack in the sword formation, causing the entire sword formation to shake violently. Nyetian was not in a hurry as he watched from the side. When most of the swordsmen had left, he signaled the others to prepare to enter the forbidden zone. Nyetian's figure directly leaped out and swooped down. With a thought, the talisman released the power of the formation, and a crack appeared in the sword formation, allowing his figure to enter. So this talisman is the key to enter the forbidden zone of desolate heaven. Nyetian landed on a boulder and restrained his aura to the extreme as he kept the talisman in his hand. Then, Han Ling and the others also descended from the sky and appeared at a place not far from Nyetian. "Is everyone okay?" Nyetian's gaze swept across and made sure that everyone was there, but a strange look flashed across his eyes. Nyetian's group was all there. He looked at everyone, planning something in his heart. There were a total of 7 people in this group: Nyetian, Lu Haoyu, Han Ling, Pu Fifan, Xiao Yun, Shengguan Yufei, and Kong Shibua. Among them, Nyetian, Lu Haoyu, and Xiao Yun were the strongest, while the other 4 were relatively weak. Everyone, crush all the talismans in your hands. At this time, Nyetian took out the talismans in his hand and crushed them without hesitation. Everyone was taken aback, not knowing what Nyetian was doing. Without the talismans in their hands, wouldn't they be eliminated directly? Everyone's talismans are the same. At the end of the sword principle competition, 100 talismans must be kept. We don't need the talismans now, but when we need them, we can just grab one. Nye Tian said with a faint smile. The others were stunned for a moment, but then they understood and crushed the talismans. Nye Tian and the others were safer without the talismans. As long as they did not leave the forbidden zone of desolate heaven, they would not be eliminated. Then, Nye Tian's gaze swept across the other 6 people and said, "The 7 of us will be divided into 3 groups. If there is an emergency, we will take care of each other as a unit. Even if we are not separated, every group must stay together." Yes, the others nodded and waited for Nye Tian's arrangement. Lu Haoyu and Pu Fifan will be in one group. Xiao Yun and Shangwan Yufei will be in another group, and the remaining 3 will be in another group. Nye Tian nodded and warned, "No matter what happens, every group must not be separated." Okay, everyone agreed. Of course, they understood the intention of Nye Tian's arrangement. The 3 groups were a combination of strong and weak. Lu Haoyu would protect Pu Fifan, Xiao Yun would protect Shangwan Yufei, and Nye Tian would protect Han Ling and Kang Shibua. Fortunately, the 2 of them were not weak. Unless they encountered a strong enemy, they would not need Nye Tian's protection under normal circumstances. After arranging all these, Nye Tian's expression relaxed a lot, but he muttered in his heart, "Desolate Heaven Palace, I wonder how many killing swords you have arranged." Killing swords. The reason why Nye Tian asked everyone to crush the talismans was because he had other suspicions. He guessed that among the swordsmen who entered the forbidden zone of desolate heaven, there must be swordsmen arranged by the desolate heaven palace. It was highly possible that these swordsmen could sense the talismans and treat all swordsmen as prey to slaughter. It had to be said that Nye Tian was really meticulous. He guessed correctly, just as Nye Tian was guessing. In a canyon of the forbidden zone of desolate heaven, 4 black-robed figures appeared, each with an extremely powerful aura. Each of them held a sensing compass in their hands, on which countless light spots flickered. They were all the swordsmen with talismans. Chapter 1201. Heaven Desolate Forbidden Region. In the canyon, 4 black-robed swordsmen looked at the sensing compass in their hands, their eyes flickering with sharp, killing intent. Nye Tian's guess was right. These 4 people were the killing swords arranged by Heaven Desolate Hall, specially slaughtering swordsmen who participated in the Sword Dao competition. Heaven Desolate Hall organized the Sword Dao competition and actually arranged killing swords in order to suppress the other sword sects. These 4 black-robed swordsmen had vigorous auras and were very powerful. Their strengths were all 6th-level Heavenly Emperor. Furthermore, they all had the realm of intermediate sword profound meaning. Such strength was absolutely considered an expert among all the swordsmen. Once they started moving, it would definitely be an abnormally bloody massacre. The 4 people smiled sinisterly, then spread out in 4 directions and started searching for their targets. In the dense forest, a swordsman hid behind a huge rock, his aura restrained to the extreme, watching the surroundings with eagle-like eyes. Swoosh! But right at this time, a sharp sword intent suddenly came from above his head. This swordsman did not even have time to let out a scream and died directly. Immediately, a black-robed figure landed, reached out, took the talisman on the corpse, and crushed it without hesitation, like crushing an ant. At the same time, the other 3 black-robed swordsmen also found their targets and instantly attacked, succeeding without exception. The targeted swordsmen died tragically on the spot before they knew what happened. In just a blink of an eye, the 4 black-robed swordsmen cleaned up all the swordsmen within dozens of kilometers. Then the 4 people flew towards the next region. The 4 people were in the dark, the other swordsmen were in the light. Plus, they were very strong, suddenly attacking. Even 6th-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists could not react in time and only had the fate of being slaughtered. Heaven Desolate Hall, the leader of the Heaven Domain's 9 great sword sects, actually used the Sword Dao competition to set up a huge trap, waiting for all the swordsmen in the Heaven Domain to dive into it. Above the Heaven Desolate Great Hall, Song Shanxue and Dugu Ni stared at the sensing spirit array, watching the light spots on the spirit array disappear one by one within different faces. and on the spirit array, there were over a dozen light spots flickering with scarlet light, different from the other dark green light. The scarlet light spots are the heaven desolate 13 swords that senior brother arranged, right? Dugu and I smiled faintly, looking at the scarlet light spots on the sensing spirit array, and said, "Yes." Songshan Shui nodded slightly, his face expressionless. 13 swords of heavenly wilderness. If anyone else was present and heard this title, they would definitely be shocked. This was because this was a sword Dao expert who was second only to the two hall masters in the Heaven Desolate Hall. Song Shanxue was really vicious to actually throw the 13 swords of Heaven Desolation into the forbidden area of Heaven Desolation. Rumor had it that the 13 Heavenly Desolation swords were the elites of the Heaven Desolation Hall who were groomed to help the Heaven Desolation Hall deal with some extremely difficult problems. The 4 black-robed swordsmen were only 4 of the 13 swords of Infinite Wasteland. There were 9 others who were doing the same thing in the forbidden area of Infinite Wasteland. Senior Brother's thoughts are indeed deep. 13 swords have been unleashed at the same time. I'm afraid it won't be long before this sword competition ends. Duguni's lips curled into a smile as he spoke with some disappointment. With the 13 Heavenly Desolation swords being executed at the same time, it would take at most a few days for the tens of thousands of swordsmen to be slaughtered, leaving at most 100 alive. The Heaven Desolation Hall was really vicious to actually let tens of thousands of swordsmen die in the forbidden area of Infinite Wasteland. I'll give the 13 of them one day. After one day, regardless of the outcome, the 13 of them will leave the forbidden area. Song Shanchue's face was indifferent and expressionless. The 13 swords of Heaven Desolation only had one day, after which they would leave the forbidden area of Infinite Wasteland. However, by that time, at least half of the swordsmen who participated in the sword competition would die. Dugu Inai smiled faintly, but his gaze towards Song Shanxue was filled with a tinge of strangeness, as though he was pondering about something. In a remote valley in the forbidden area of Infinite Wasteland, several figures were hiding. One of them had flying silver hair and a sharp gaze. It was Nie Tian. I've already sensed that there are no other swordsmen around. We're safe here, Nie Tian said faintly, but his expression was not relaxed at all. He had already discovered that the sword formation of the forbidden area of Infinite Wasteland had a certain suppression on his perception. He could only sense everything within a 5-kilometer radius, and any further would be extremely blurry. Moreover, he could not expand his divine sense all the time, which consumed too much of his mental strength. Lu Haoyu, guard outside the valley. Nie Tian glanced at Lu Haoyu and said to the latter, "Yes." Lu Haoyu responded. His figure moved, hiding on a giant tree outside the valley, and like an eagle, he stared at everything around him. Are we just going to wait like this? In the valley, Shangguan Yufei disapproved of Nie Tian's actions and even felt that the latter was too cowardly. He obviously had terrifying strength, but he hid in a valley like a turtle. Wasn't he crazy? Shangguan Yufei participated in the sword competition to show off her skills and meet the sword geniuses of other sword sects. Since the day she was born, she had been staying in the abyss of still water. This was her first time coming to the outside world, so of course she was very curious. Let's wait like this. Nie Tian glanced at Shangguan Yufei and said indifferently, without explaining anything. He had read countless people, and of course he could see that Shangguan Yufei was a young lady with no experience. She probably still thought that the sword competition was just a competition, and it didn't matter whether she won or lost. She never thought that once her identity was exposed, once she lost, she would lose her life. Shangguan Yufei didn't realize that the sword competition was a bloody life and death gamble, and the loser would undoubtedly die. If Nie Tian was alone, of course, he wouldn't hide in the valley, but he had Kong Shibua, Pu Fifan, and others with him, and he had to ensure their safety, so even if he had to suffer a little, it didn't matter. Nie Tian's current idea was very simple. That was to wait quietly until it was almost over, and then find a way to get the talisman. Shangguan Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered, and she was irritated by Nie Tian's stubborn attitude. She growled in a low voice, "Coward! Yufei!" Xiao Yin frowned and quickly stopped Shangguan Yufei. Shangguan Yufei didn't understand Nie Tian's intention, but Xiao Yin was very clear, and he also agreed with Nie Tian's approach. The sword competition was not important, but the ancient sword tomb. As long as he could enter the ancient sword tomb, what was wrong with hiding for a while? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth slightly twitched, but he wasn't angry. Shangguan Yufei was too simple, and he just treated it as a child throwing a tantrum. "I don't want to stay here." At this moment, Kong Shibua, who had just dealt with Shangguan Yufei, stood up and said word by word with a cold face, "I want to go out." "Huh?" Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed, and then he immediately understood and said in a deep voice, "Kong Shibua, if you go out of the valley now, you will die. You are too weak, and it is impossible for you to avenge your second uncle. Not to mention a swordsman like Inji Wei. Even if you meet someone on the Earth Sword ranking, you won't be able to defeat them." Chapter 1202. When Kong Shibua took the first step, Nie Tian knew that he wanted to find Inji Wei for revenge. This kind of thinking was too laughable and childish. Inji Wei was eager for Kong Shibua to find him so that he could get rid of a future threat. Kong Shibua was a genius swordsman. As long as he was given 10 or even 5 years, he would definitely catch up with Inji Wei. At that time, it would be easy for him to take revenge. "I want revenge." Suddenly, Kong Shibua roared furiously. His eyes were crimson red and bloodshot, and his handsome face was slightly savage. Nie Tian could not help but frown. He did not expect Kong Shibua to have so much hatred. It seemed that the dead second uncle was very important to him. "Okay." At this time, Shangguan Yufei spoke again and said, "I will go with you. I will help you take revenge." Nie Tian's eyes glanced at Shangguan Yufei. Why did this missy want to join the fun at this time? "Yufei!" Xiao Yin stopped Shangguan Yufei with an ugly expression. Han Ling and the others were also stunned and did not know what to do. "Kong Shibua, if you want revenge, I will not stop you. But now you're in the same group as me. I am the group leader and have the right to order you. If you dare to take half a step out of this canyon, I will kill you with my own hands." Nie Tian's eyes suddenly darkened and his face became gloomy as he stared at Kong Shibua and said. His voice was as cold as ice. Everyone stared at Nie Tian with their mouths agape. Sensing the coldness surging around Nie Tian, their eyes began to tremble. Kong Shibua stared at Nie Tian in surprise. In the end, he did not take a step forward. Instead, he roared, "Why don't you let me take revenge?" "Revenge?" Nie Tianling laughed and said, "Do you know what revenge is? Before you have the strength, you want to find your enemy. This is not revenge, this is suicide." No one knew the desire for revenge better than Nie Tian. Ever since he was reborn, he thought about revenge every moment. Even now that he was in the divine realm of the heaven realm, he could only suppress his desire for revenge because he was not strong enough. Anger without strength was meaningless. Suicide? Kong Shibua was stunned. His expression became sluggish, and his eyes suddenly became disappointed. The anger in his eyes gradually turned into calmness. Nie Tian was right. If you want to find Inji Wei now, it was tantamount to suicide. The coldness in Nie Tian's eyes faded as he looked at Kong Shibua and said with determination, "If you really want to take revenge, then stay here. I promise you that I'll take you into the sword tomb and let you obtain the legacy of the Tao of the sword." Kong Shibua looked at Nie Tian and felt the strong confidence released by the latter. His eyes could not help but flicker. Kong Shibua looked at Tian. He felt the strong confidence released by Nie Tian. Shangguan Yufei was dumbfounded. She hadn't expected Nie Tian, who was so gentle when he was quiet, to be so terrifying when he was enraged. Nie Tian's expression did not change, but he laughed in his heart and said, "If I can't handle you kids, how can I be the #1 war god in the heaven realm?" "Mr. Nie." Right at this time, a voice sounded out in Nie Tian's mind. It was precisely Lu Haoyu who transmitted over. Nie Tian's divine sense moved. his gaze involuntarily turning intent. He shook his head helplessly and said, "Someone's coming. Looks like we have to change places." Tian sensed that several figures were currently sprinting wildly in the direction of the canyon. It was definitely Kong Sherba's angry roar just now that attracted them. Fortunately, these few people's strengths were not strong, all only around 3rd level Heavenly Emperor strength. Their Sword Dao realm was not high either, only Sword Soul realm. Tian and the rest walked out of the canyon and originally wanted to leave, but they were a step too late. Several figures already came out. It was precisely those few people that he sensed. The arrivals were a total of 4 people, clearly a small team. The one in the lead was a middle-aged swordsman with a knife scar on his face. His strength was 4th level Heavenly Emperor. A pair of cold eyes glanced at Tian, then immediately shifted to Shangguan Yufei, releasing a lascivious light. There were a total of 4 people, clearly a small team. The one in the lead was a middle-aged swordsman with a knife scar on his face. His strength was at the 4th level of Heavenly Emperor. A pair of cold eyes glanced at Tian, then shifted to Shangguan Yufei, releasing a lustful light. "Ha, us brothers' luck is pretty good. We can even run into a shrewish little girl. We can have a good time." The scar-faced swordsman chuckled, his greedy gaze roaming Shangguan Yufei's body without any scruples. He saw that Tian, Xiao Yun, and the rest were all young swordsmen, seemingly only in their 20s. There was also Kong Sherba and Pu Fifan, these 2 children. He naturally would not take it to heart. He was even puzzled. Such a strange team. Where did they get the courage to participate in the Sword Dao competition? Courting death. Shangguan Yufei had a belly full of anger with nowhere to vent. Being teased so blatantly at this moment, how could she tolerate it? With a shout, her figure moved, directly stabbing a sword out towards the scar-faced swordsman. Whoosh! Shangguan Yufei's sword slashed out. Sword intent erupted. It actually gave off a crisp sound. Following that, a sword image condensed from water vapor appeared, rolling over. "Yoho, what a shrewish little girl. Your father likes it." Facing Shangguan Yufei's attack, the scar-faced swordsman merely smiled. A greenish-black heavy sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed out with it. Within the violent sword intent, countless thorns and vines were released, as if they were dancing giant snakes, surging out in all directions. Amen. When Shangguan Yufei saw this scene, her brows furrowed slightly, panic flickering in her eyes. She did not expect that the other party's move was so huge. He actually wanted to take her life. Sigh. Tian watched by the side and could not help sighing lightly. Shangguan Yufei's strength was not weak. Even if she was only 3rd level Heavenly Emperor, her still water sword intent was bizarre to the extreme. If she fought with all her might, she could similarly kill the scar-faced swordsman. Unfortunately, Shangguan Yufei did not see the situation clearly at all, only treating this as a contest and not a life-and-death struggle. But under this sword move of the scar-faced swordsman, he exerted all of his strength and did not show any mercy. It was naturally hard for Shangguan Yufei to resist. Just as the wildly dancing thorny vines were about to hit Shangguan Yufei, they suddenly paused and then disappeared. Shangguan Yufei was taken aback, immediately looking at that scar-faced swordsman. The latter actually became a headless corpse. Tian took a step out. It was precisely him who made a move to decapitate the scar-faced swordsman. Shangguan Yufei, you watch clearly. Sword Dao competition is not a martial arts competition, but a life-and-death duel. Tian looked at Shangguan Yufei and said solemnly, "You show mercy to him, but he won't show mercy to you." Shangguan Yufei was dumbfounded there and could not react for a long time. Fortunately, Tian made a move in time just now. Otherwise, she would be seriously injured even if she did not die. She could not understand why the other party wanted to kill her the moment they met. Even if the other party was provoking her, she only made a move with the intention of teaching him a lesson and did not think of killing the other party. Her thinking was completely wrong. It was just a naive view of the world of a little girl who had never left home. This Only then did the other few swordsmen react, looking at Nye Tian with shocked faces. They did not see how the latter made a move at all just now. Run. In virtually an instant, the same thought emerged in the minds of the few people. Immediately, they turned around and fled, not even looking back. Unfortunately, it was already too late. In the sky, several streaks of piercing sword intent whistled out, directly killing the few people. The person who made a move was precisely Lu Haoyu. Chapter 1203. As the mocking voice faded, a white-robed figure appeared. His eyes were filled with coldness as he locked onto Nye Tian. In Jiwei. Seeing the figure in front of him, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. Why did he encounter this god of death at this time? What? Are you unhappy to meet me? In Jiwei stared coldly at Nye Tian. He hated Nye Tian for injuring him with a sword and embarrassing him in front of everyone. No one would be happy to meet a mad dog that bites anyone it sees. Nye Tian sneered and said coldly. In Jiwei was very strong, which made Nye Tian rather fearful. Most importantly, the power of Nye Tian's sword skills would be greatly reduced if he could not use the Heaven Slash sword. Even if he used the Dark Star Ghost Kill now, he might not be able to hurt In Jiwei. It's you. Seeing In Jiwei appear, Kong Shibua's eyes surged with terrifying anger. Scarlet flame, sword essence, surged from his body, and the surrounding space seemed to be burning. Nye Tian glanced at Kong Shibua, motioning him not to be impulsive. Kong Shibua stood on the spot and did not move. He deeply remembered Nye Tian's words and would not be reckless again. In Jiwei, what do you want? Lu Haoyu's figure moved and came to the side of Nye Tian and the others. He looked at In Jiwei and roared. Humph! In Jiwei sneered and raised his eyebrows. I'm going to kill all of you. Now that they were in the forbidden region of Infinite Wasteland, In Jiwei would not be afraid of the identity of Lu Haoyu and the others. Lu Haoyu and the others died in the forbidden region of Infinite Wasteland, and Mo Qianjun would not allow them to die in the hands of others. Moreover, the sword principle competition was a fair battle. Even if Mo Qianjun knew, he might not attack In Jiwei. A mad dog that bites anyone it sees. Nye Tianling sneered. He spread out his divine sense, and the 9 yuan meridians in his body began to circulate crazily. Yuan energy surged around his body, ready to burst forth with terrifying power in the next moment. Since he couldn't use the absolute sword Heaven Slash, Nye Tian would use the Dragon Vein to fight In Jiwei. Nye Tian hadn't fully used his dual meridians ever since he'd integrated them. The opponents he'd met before were basically killed in one move by the Dragon Meridians. At this moment, he could use In Jiwei to verify the power of the dual meridians fusion. Still want to resist? In Jiwei smiled cold. A terrifying silver immortal soul sword intent appeared behind him. The silver-white sword intent was like flowing mercury, spreading in the air. The terrifying sword intent aura filled the air. What a terrifying aura! Lu Haoyu and the others narrowed their eyes, and their hearts trembled. After not seeing him for half a month, In Jiwei's sword intent had become even more terrifying, much stronger than before. The Silver Spirit's sword essence is indeed terrifying. Xiaoyun sensed the silver-white sword intent behind In Jiwei, his gaze trembling a little. He could perceive that with his strength, the still water sword intent could not contend with the silver immortal sword intent. This was not to say that the still water sword intent was weaker than the silver immortal sword intent, but that Xiaoyun's own strength was insufficient. He only had 5th level Heavenly Emperor strength, initial rank sword Profound Realm, while In Jiwei had 7th level Heavenly Emperor strength, high rank sword Profound Realm. The disparity between the two people was too great. The still water sword intent was also unable to make up for it. But Xiaoyun was still very young, while In Jiwei was already over 100 years old. Advancing in the future would be even harder. Hence, the former's sword Dao talent far surpassed the latter. You guys retreat. Nye Tian's gaze turned intent, the corners of his mouth twitching a little, indicating for Lu Haoyu and the rest to retreat. In Jiwei was a lunatic, killing people on sight. It was best for the others not to approach. Just the likes of you also want to fight with me? In Jiwei smiled cold, speaking arrogantly, but he was incredibly surprised in his heart. Half a month ago, when he fought with Nie Tian, the latter was still just 4th level Heavenly Emperor. Now, he was actually already 5th level Heavenly Emperor. The speed of his strength advancement was also too fast. 5th level Heavenly Emperor was the watershed of the Heavenly Emperor realm. Nie Tian could actually break through effortlessly. It was seriously bizarre. Only at this moment did In Jiwei know that Nie Tian was a very terrifying opponent. He must be killed. Otherwise, it would definitely become a great disaster. Did you forget? You were defeated by me with 1 sword before. Nie Tian smiled faintly, a reddish-gold, lightning sea appearing behind him. The Supreme Dragon Chi, after dual meridians fused, was released. The surrounding space was pulled tight, as if it was going to be torn apart in the next instant. Courting death, having his scar touched, In Jiwei was immediately greatly enraged, the silver immortal blade in his hand stabbing out. A silvery white sword image appeared, several hundred meters in size. A horrifying aura exploded out. The ground was directly torn apart. The trees within 1,000 meters in the surroundings were directly crushed down by the sword intent air billows. In Jiwei's sword intent was not vast and mighty, but it was abnormally swift and fierce. The sword intent was thick to the extreme, giving people a suffocating feeling. Supreme Dragon Soul, come on out. Facing In Jiwei's fatal sword, Nie Tian's gaze was like water, calm and without ripples. Only the firmest determination to kill did not change from start to end. Since he used the supreme dual meridians, he had to utterly crush In Jiwei. Roar! When the mighty voice landed, a crimson gold colossal dragon appeared in the void. A heaven-shaking dragon roar echoed out, shaking heavenly emperors. The trees within several tens of thousands of meters in the surroundings were like small saplings, directly falling to the ground from the impact of the berserk air billows. A full 3,000 meters in size crimson gold colossal dragon appeared, the power of lightning surging around it, circulating like lightning. And on the outer layer of the dragon's body, a glaring sun-like light flickered, appearing incomparably majestic, making people prostrate themselves in worship. What kind of power is this? By the side, Xiao Yun and the rest were completely dumbfounded, the shock in their hearts unable to be any greater. It was hard to imagine that Nie Tian could actually release such terrifying power. The others even had dazed gazes, directly petrified on the spot, opening their mouths wide, unable to speak. In Jiwei felt an incomparably vast aura pressing down on him. His gaze stagnated, unable to suppress the panic that flashed across his eyes. He completely did not expect that there was such a vast power hidden in Nie Tian's body. If he had known this earlier, he would definitely not have dared to provoke Nie Tian. Unfortunately, it was too late now. He was the one who forced Nie Tian to use the power of the supreme dual meridians, so he had to pay the price for it. Boom! The body of the crimson gold colossal dragon rolled. The power of lightning and the power of the sun suddenly erupted, drowning the silvery white sword shadow directly in the dragon's might, unable to resist at all. Back then, when Nie Tian and Lin Yi's dual meridians merged for the first time, he could directly fight against an expert like Shi Wushang. Now that he had merged dual meridians alone, his power was naturally even stronger. However, Nie Tian did not dare to use the supreme dual meridians in public. It was too ostentatious. If it attracted the attention of people with ulterior motives, it would be very bad. The power of the supreme dual meridians was too strong. Everyone wanted it, just like Shi Wushang, and even an ancient expert like the Soul Eater Demon King coveted the supreme dual meridians. One could imagine what other people would think when they saw the supreme dual meridians. Since In Jiwei had seen the supreme dual meridians, then he must die. Boom! The crimson gold colossal dragon rolled over, and In Jiwei was completely stunned, unable to resist. As long as the crimson gold colossal dragon pressed over, Wei would definitely die, and his soul would definitely perish. However, at this moment, Niet Tian suddenly frowned and shouted, "There's someone behind, be careful." In the next instant, the meteor wings appeared behind Niet Tian, and he directly gave up on Wei, flying towards Kong Shibua. Chapter 1204. Just as Niet Tian was about to kill Wei, there was a sudden change. A black-robed figure appeared on the holographic projection, stabbing towards Kong Shibua with a murderous sword. The black-robed figure's concealment technique was very good, and Lu Haoyu, Xiao Yun, and the others did not notice him. Moreover, this person was very strong, and even if Lu Haoyu and the others noticed him, they might not be able to save Kong Shibua. At the critical moment, Niet Tian directly gave up on Wei, and his figure flashed as he punched towards the sky. Although Niet Tian really wanted to kill Wei, Kong Shibua's life was clearly more important. Not to mention that Niet Tian had already promised the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace that he would definitely protect Kong Shibua's safety. Just based on Kong Shibua's talent in swordsmanship alone, Niet Tian could not bear to see him die so tragically. Niet Tian's figure moved, and the crimson golden dragon that was surging towards Wei immediately turned and roared into the sky. The giant dragon formed by the dual meridians of the sovereign martial artist was so strong that even the void could not withstand the terrifying pressure, and it seemed like it would split at any time. "You cowardly scoundrel, come out!" Niet Tian let out a deep roar, and the power of thunder and the power of the blazing sun burst out of the crimson golden dragon, condensing into countless giant, flaming lightning bolts that rushed out like long snakes, surging fiercely. In the next moment, a surprised voice sounded in the sky, followed by a dull thud. A black-robed figure appeared in the void, and was actually forced to retreat by the mighty dragon's might. His figure trembled, and he was finally sent flying. Lu Haoyu and the others were stunned, and they looked up into the sky to see a black-robed figure in a bloody mess. Everyone was shocked, and they did not know when this black-robed figure had approached them. Fortunately, Niet Tian had acted in time, or the consequences would have been unimaginable. How is this possible? The black-robed figure was stunned, and his eyes were filled with great shock, unable to believe the scene in front of him. He had wanted to kill Kong Shibua and the others while Niet Tian and Wei were fighting, but he had never imagined that Niet Tian would be able to detect his presence. This was the forbidden area of Infinite Wasteland, where there was the suppression of the sword formation. Ordinary swordsmen's perception was greatly suppressed, and even if they were within 100 meters, they might not be able to detect it. He and Niet Tian were thousands of meters apart, but the latter was able to detect his presence the moment he attacked. It was really strange. "You're from the Heaven Wasteland Hall?" Niet Tian stood on the golden-red dragon with disdain in his eyes, as if a dragon god had descended to the world. He had guessed correctly. The black-clothed martial artist in front of him was from the Heaven Desolate Palace, one of the 13 swords of Heaven Desolate. The black-clothed cultivator's gaze sank slightly as fear flashed in his eyes. He had not expected Niet Tian to be able to guess this. "Looks like my guess is correct." Niet Tian smiled faintly as he looked at Wei below and bellowed, Wei, are you still not going to scram?" Wei suddenly reacted as if he had just woken up from a dream. His gaze trembled for a moment, but he did not say a word as his figure moved and he left. He had obviously been frightened by what had just happened. If Niet Tian had not suddenly changed his target, he would have died. The mad dog has left. It's time to kill the mouse. After confirming that Wei had left, Niet Tian's cold gaze locked onto the black-clothed cultivator with a murderous intent. He had scared Wei away because he did not want the latter to get in the way. "Kid, you're too arrogant." The black-clothed cultivator's gaze trembled. Niet Tian did not take him seriously at all, which greatly infuriated him. With a low roar, a black longsword appeared in the black-clothed cultivator's hand. The shape was extremely strange, like a curved snake, and it emitted a sinister aura. "Humph!" Niet Tian swept his gaze across the black-clothed cultivator with a disdainful face. Die for me. The black-clothed cultivator felt Niet Tion's disdain and became even angrier. The black longsword pierced out diagonally, and a whistling sound rang out in the air. After which, a long black snake appeared. It was actually condensed from swordwill and was thousands of meters long. It opened its bloody mouth and rushed towards Niet Tion crazily. Want to escape? Niet Tion Lung coldly smiled. The black-clothed cultivator was not stupid. This sword was just a feint. His silhouette flickered at the same time, wanting to escape. The anger he had shown earlier was just a facade, wanting to confuse Niet Tion. If it was anyone else, they would definitely fall for it. Unfortunately, the person he was facing was Niet Tion. Niet Tion's gaze darkened. He flapped his wings, and the huge dragon beneath his feet disappeared. His silhouette was like lightning, directly bypassing the long black snake and appearing not far behind the black-clothed cultivator. Holographic imprisonment. Activate. In the blink of an eye, Niet Tion's divine sense moved, and a terrifying spiritual deterrent appeared. An invisible holographic divine rune condensed into a spiritual net, enveloping the black-clothed cultivator. The black-clothed cultivator felt his divine sense tremble and exclaimed in surprise. In the next moment, his expression became sluggish. Die! Niet Tion flapped his wings, and a sharp starlight blade whistled past, directly piercing the black-clothed cultivator's chest. The latter did not even have the time to scream and died on the spot. His figure fell to the ground. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Lu Haoyu and the rest had not reacted to what was going on. Niet Tion's figure descended and raised his palm. A sensing compass appeared in his hand. Heaven Wasteland Palace, you have indeed done something. You actually want to kill all the swordsmen in the Sword Dao competition. Niet Tion's gaze swept across the sensing compass and saw countless light spots moving. He immediately understood. Anger burned in his eyes, and his body slightly trembled. The sensing compass confirmed his conjecture. The Heaven Wasteland Palace arranged killing swords in Heaven Wasteland's forbidden region. The black-clothed swordsman who was killed in front of him was just one of the countless killing swords. No idea how many more such people there were in Heaven Wasteland's forbidden region. Mr. Nya, are you all right? Lu Haoyu and the rest surrounded, looking at Niet Tion in shock. I'm fine. Let's leave first. Niet Tion took a look and sensed that there were several scarlet light spots currently sprinting over. Hence, he did not dare to delay and left right away. The 7 people's figures were very fast, vanishing without a trace in a twinkle. After a moment, 3 black-clothed figures arrived in the air and landed beside the corpse on the ground. 13th brother. The 3 people roared at the same time when they saw the corpse on the ground. Violent rage erupted like a snowy mountain. The surrounding space started trembling. The black-clothed swordsman killed by Niet Tion was precisely Desolate 13 of the Heaven Wasteland 13 swords, the weakest one among the 13 swords. Even the weakest one had the strength of a 6th-level Heavenly Emperor, sufficient to annihilate most of the swordsmen in Heaven Wasteland's forbidden region. Unfortunately, he was unlucky and encountered Niet Tion. Standing beside Desolate 13 were Desolate 10, Desolate 11, and Desolate 12. The 4 of them were a team. But now someone died. How could they not be furious? The Heaven Wasteland 13 swords grew up together. Although they were not biological brothers, their relationship was closer than blood. 13th brother being killed, the grief in the hearts of the other 3 could be imagined. 10th brother, what should we do? Desolate 12 panted heavily, clearly furious to the extreme as he asked solemnly. Revenge. Desolate 10's expression was extremely grim as he squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth and said, 13th brother, no matter who killed you, I must make him pay the price in blood.